Hey there, tonight we're weaving through the vibrant world of ancient Indian textiles, where the truth is, some of those intricate patterns were created by artisans who never even touched a loom. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. You're jolted awake by the sound of handmade looms clacking away in the distance, a kind of ancient alarm clock that tells you, welcome to ancient India, where textile weaving isn't just an occupation, it's practically a way of life. The air is filled with the earthy scent of cotton and the faint whiff of colorful dyes. You stretch and step out into the vibrant tapestry of a world that, spoiler alert, will one day revolutionize global trade routes. First things first, raw materials. You're in an era where cotton is king, and it's not just any cotton. This is Gossypium arboreum, a native species, and it's growing in abundance across the plains. Legend has it, the Greeks named cotton the wool that grows on trees. And while that sounds delightfully magical, the reality is that cotton was one of the most labor-intensive crops around. Farmers needed to plant, water, and pick it, all by hand. But cotton wasn't the only player in the game. Silk was the luxury fabric of choice, and it came from the Barmix Mori silkworm, which sounds more like a Harry Potter spell than a key economic resource. But hey, that's history for you. Now, let's talk geography, because location isn't just a modern mantra. The regions of Gujarat and Tamil Nadu were the Bay-and-Say and Jay-Z of the textile world. Why? Well, Gujarat had easy access to the Arabian Sea, making it a prime spot for maritime trade. Tamil Nadu, on the other hand, was home to skilled weavers who could turn thread into gold, figuratively speaking, of course. These regions became powerhouses not just because of what they produced, but because of where they were. Proximity to trade routes meant that their textiles could travel far and wide, all the way to the Romans and beyond. Now, hold up. Before you get swept up in the romantic notion of ancient trade, let's not forget the economics. Textiles were a hot commodity, yes, but not all weavers were living in luxury. For the average artisan, weaving was hard, repetitive work. These artisans didn't just wake up and toss together a sari before breakfast. They worked with intricate looms, which, by the way, were technological marvels of their time. Picture a wooden contraption with a mind-boggling number of moving parts, each one essential to creating those beautiful patterns. And just to put things into perspective, some of these looms had up to 100 heddles. That's a lot of thread to keep track of. But why did textiles matter so much? Well, they weren't just about looking good. They were a critical part of the economy. Textiles were one of India's major exports, and their trade routes stretched as far as China and the Middle East. We're talking about a time when a single piece of fine silk could be worth its weight in gold. And let's not forget the Silk Road, that legendary network of trade routes that connected the East and West. While spices and precious stones also made their way along these paths, it was textiles that often paved the way. Now, you might be thinking, sure, silk sounds fancy, but wasn't everyone wearing simple cotton? Well, that's another myth we have to bust. Textiles in ancient India were as diverse as the culture. From the simple dhoti to the elaborate sari, clothing was as much about expression as it was about necessity. The elite flaunted their wealth through intricate patterns and vibrant colors, while the working class opted for durability and comfort. And just to sprinkle in some concrete data, a fine piece of silk cloth could sell for as much as 100 dinars in the Roman market, a small fortune back then. And speaking of fortunes, let's introduce the key players, the artisan weavers. These folks were the backbone of the industry, masters of their craft who could weave dreams into fabric. They passed their skills down through generations, like a family heirloom. But despite their expertise, many weavers lived modest lives. The fruits of their labor often lined the pockets of merchants and traders who could navigate the complex world of commerce. It's a classic case of the rich getting richer while the artisans did the heavy lifting. As the day unfolds, you wander through the bustling markets, where bolts of fabric hang like rainbows in the sun. You hear the chatter of traders haggling in a dozen different languages, each one trying to get the best deal. This is the economic engine of ancient India, fueled by the tireless work of its people and the endless demand for its textiles. So as you stand there, in the thick of it all, just remember, this isn't just a scene from a history book. It's a vivid tableau of a world where textiles were more than just fabric. They were a cornerstone of civilization, a thread that wove together cultures and economies across continents. And all of it began with the simple hum of looms, one morning in ancient India. With the sun now casting a warm, golden glow over the village, it's time to dive headfirst into the heart of ancient India's textile industry, the weaving workshop. And let me tell you, this isn't just any old shed with a few dusty looms. It's the nerve center of creativity, sweat, and a bit of magic. Here, the rhythmic clatter of looms is as constant as your morning cup of chai. First up, we've got the pit loom, which sounds like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, but is actually just a loom that's, well, set into a pit. Weavers sat on the ground with their feet in the pit, operating the treadles beneath like they're playing a foot-pedal organ. It might not seem glamorous, but it was sheer genius for creating those tightly packed threads essential for durable fabric. If you're imagining a back-breaking job, congratulations, you're spot on. Hours spent hunched over, legs pumping like a Tour de France cyclist. Yeah, it was no walk in the park. But this setup allowed for incredible control over the tension of the warp threads, which is a fancy way of saying they could weave some seriously fine fabric. Next in line is the backstrap loom. Picture this, a strap around your back, connected to the loom, letting you use your body weight to keep the tension. It's like the ancient version of a full-body workout, but with a side of artistic expression. Weavers here were like human yo-yos, moving back and forth with each pass of the shuttle. If you're thinking it sounds like a chiropractor's nightmare, you'd be right, but the flexibility it offered was unmatched. This loom was portable, versatile, and could be set up almost anywhere, perfect for artisans who were as mobile as they were skilled. Now, let's chat about the techniques, because weaving wasn't just about slapping threads together. Enter ikat and brocade weaving, the haute couture of the ancient world. Ikat involved dyeing the threads before they were woven into fabric. Think of it as premeditated tie-dye, but with a PhD in patience. The weavers had to map out the design on the threads before weaving, so the pattern would emerge as the fabric was woven, a mind-boggling feat of precision. And then there's brocade, the epitome of luxury. It involved adding gold and silver threads into the fabric, creating dazzling patterns that could blind you with their brilliance. The time and skill needed for these techniques made them the Rolls-Royce of textiles, but they also meant that the average weaver wasn't exactly rolling in rupees. Speaking of rolling in it, or rather not, let's tackle the myth of the idyllic artisan. Sure, the romantic image of a weaver serenely crafting fabric sounds great, but reality, not so much. Most weavers were part of the lower social strata, and their lives were as tangled as the threads they worked with. The caste system played a defining role here, dictating not just who could weave, but what they could weave. The elite castes often controlled the production of luxury fabrics, while lower castes handled the more mundane textiles. And don't even think about crossing those boundaries. Society had zero chill about that. For the majority, weaving was grueling, repetitive labor with modest pay. We're not talking about artisanal prices at your local boutique here. A skilled weaver might earn just enough to keep the hearth warm and the belly moderately satisfied. The profits, those largely lined the pockets of traders and merchants who knew how to work the system. Imagine spending days, even weeks, on a single piece of cloth, only to watch someone else reap the financial rewards. It's like selling a masterpiece at a garage sale price. Painful, but that's how the silk spun. Economically, weaving workshops were microcosms of the larger trade networks that stretched across continents. They were the grassroots of a global industry, yet the socio-economic gap between the creators and the sellers was as wide as the Ganges. It's a reminder that while textiles may have woven societies together, they also highlighted the threads of inequality. So, as you stand in this buzzing workshop, surrounded by the whoosh of shuttles and the earthy smell of dyed yarn, it's clear that weaving wasn't just a trade. It was a tapestry of human experience. Each thread told a story, of skill, of struggle, of survival. And while the sun continues its climb, casting long shadows over the looms, you can't help but wonder about the hands that work them, their dreams woven into every piece of fabric that traveled the ancient world. But don't get too lost in thought. There's plenty more to unravel as we continue this journey through the warp and weft of ancient India's textile legacy. Stay tuned, because the loom of history is just getting started. As you step away from the rhythmic dance of looms, the sun now high in the sky, you're drawn toward the bustling heart of the ancient market. Here, textiles don't just hang, they sing, each bolt of fabric a testament to the artistry and toil of countless weavers. Welcome to the economic hub, where dreams are traded in yards and meters, where the art of the deal is as intricate as the embroidery. Now, let's talk numbers, because while the colors and patterns might dazzle the eyes, it's the cost that hits the wallet. In this vibrant bazaar, a piece of fine silk might set you back 100 dinars, a small fortune for most. But don't let the price tag fool you into thinking everyone here is swimming in wealth. The reality. The market is a complex web where middlemen thrive. They're the unsung puppeteers of this textile theater, buying low from weavers and selling high to merchants, pocketing the difference with a smile as wide as the Ganges. It's a classic tale of the middleman, a role as old as trade itself, and one that's as persistent as a bad haircut. Speaking of persistent, let's not forget the legal framework that holds this market together. Yes, even in ancient India, there were rules to the game, lest chaos reign supreme. The Maurya and Gupta empires, those political powerhouses, laid down laws like a master weaver lays down threads. Weights and measures were strictly regulated. Imagine trying to haggle over fabric without standardized units. Anarchy. Picture a merchant trying to pass off a 2-yard sari as a 3-yard one. The result? Fines that could empty your coin pouch faster than you could say Silk Road. And it wasn't just about the size of the fabric. Quality was king, and there were inspectors to ensure that the textiles met the standards. Think of them as the ancient version of quality control, making sure no one was sneaking in subpar goods. The penalties for fraud. Let's just say you wouldn't be invited back to the market anytime soon. It's a system that kept both sellers and buyers on their toes, a delicate balance between profit and honesty. But hold up, before you get too comfortable with the idea of a well-oiled machine. Remember this, politics loomed large over the textile trade, even more so than those towering looms. The Maurya and Gupta empires didn't just lay down the law, they wielded influence like a scepter. These empires understood that textiles were more than just commodities, they were political tools. Control the textiles, and you could control the economy. And control the economy, well, you get the picture. Under the Mauryan Empire, textile production was heavily encouraged, almost like an ancient version of a government subsidy. They realized that a flourishing textile industry wasn't just good for the economy, it was crucial for maintaining power. Trade routes were protected, markets were developed, and weavers were given incentives to produce their finest work. The Gupta Empire took it a step further, making textiles the backbone of their trade relations. These empires didn't just influence the textile trade, they molded it, using it as both a carrot and a stick in their diplomatic arsenal. But let's not romanticize this too much. While the empires were busy playing chess with their textiles, the average weaver was more like a pawn in this grand game. Sure, the markets were vibrant and the trade routes were vast, but for the individual artisan, the rewards were often elusive. The profits largely went to those at the top, the traders and merchants who knew how to navigate the legal and political maze. It's a sobering reminder that the beauty of the fabric often hid the harshness of the reality behind it. Yet, despite these challenges, the markets were a living tapestry of culture and commerce. Traders haggled in a multitude of languages, from Sanskrit to Tamil to Greek, each one trying to eke out a better deal. The air was thick with the scent of spices and the sound of clinking coins, a symphony of economies colliding. It's a scene that would warm the heart of any modern economist, a testament to the timeless dance of supply and demand. So there you have it, a glimpse into the vibrant world of ancient Indian textile markets, where the threads of history were spun as much by politics and economics as they were by the weavers themselves. As you stand amidst the hustle and bustle, remember that this isn't just a story of fabric. It's a story of human ingenuity, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of beauty and profit. And with the day far from over, there's plenty more to unravel in this fascinating tale. Keep your eyes peeled and your ears open, because the next chapter of our journey promises to be as rich and colorful as the textiles themselves. As we delve deeper into the rich tapestry of ancient Indian textiles, it's time to shift our focus from the bustling marketplace to the cultural and symbolic weight these fabrics carried. Textiles weren't just the clothes on your back. They were the story you wore, the status you flaunted, and sometimes even the guards you appeased. Let's unravel this colorful saga, one thread at a time. In ancient India, textiles were like the Instagram of their era, an immediate visual status update. Imagine walking into a room draped in the finest silk, the intricate patterns announcing your social standing louder than a town crier. This wasn't just about showing off. It was about establishing your place in the cosmic order. Your attire could mark you as a ruler, a holy man, or just a commoner trying to make ends meet. The affluent wrapped themselves in silk, embroidered with threads of gold and silver, while those of humbler means donned the more ubiquitous cart. Let's talk about the big guns of textile symbolism, religious and royal garments. In Hindu ceremonies, for example, specific colors and fabrics were not mere preferences but sacred mandates. White symbolized purity and was a staple in religious rituals. Red, on the other hand, was the color of auspicious beginnings, often seen at weddings. Saffron robes were donned by ascetics, a nod to their renunciation of worldly desires. These weren't just fashion choices. They were loaded statements of faith and identity. But before you get too swept away by the grandeur, let's tackle some less glamorous truths. The production of these textiles was far from a serene artistic pursuit. It was a labor-intensive process that often involved entire families, and yes, that included children. Child labor is not a modern invention, folks. In these communities, learning to weave was as much a part of growing up as learning to walk. Young hands were adept at some tasks adults found fiddly, like threading looms, which only compounded the harsh reality that child labor was a grim but necessary cog in the textile machinery. And while we're pulling back the curtain on production, let's not forget the environmental cost of those dazzling dyes. Natural dyes were extracted from plants, minerals, and insects, but this natural process wasn't exactly green. Take indigo, the superstar of blue dyes. Cultivating indigo required enormous amounts of water, a resource as precious then as it is now. The dyeing process also released waste into local water sources, affecting both the ecology and the communities relying on those rivers for clean water. Romantic notions of ancient sustainability quickly fade when faced with the environmental impact of producing those vibrant hues. Now, let's pivot to the royal courts, where textiles were both the backdrop and the star of the show. Kings and queens weren't just rulers, they were patrons of the arts, and textiles were their canvas. Royal garments often featured motifs that represented power and divine favor. Think lotus flowers, elephants, and mythical creatures. These designs weren't just decorative, they were political statements wrapped in silk. Wearing a robe with a peacock motif, for example, wasn't just about looking fabulous. It was a nod to royalty itself, as the peacock was the bird of the guards, symbolizing immortality and authority. And speaking of authority, the royal demand for textiles could make or break a weaving community. A royal order was a double-edged sword. While it guaranteed work, it also meant the pressure to produce perfection under strict deadlines. Imagine working day and night, knowing that a single flaw could result in dire consequences, not just for you, but your entire community. The stakes were as high as the ceilings in those opulent palaces, while the idea of textiles as storytelling mediums conjures images of artful expression. Let's not overlook their utilitarian side. For the common person, textiles were about survival as much as style. Durable cotton was the workhorse of fabrics, practical for everyday wear and tear. And then there's the dhoti, a versatile piece of cloth that could be adapted for everything from labor in the fields to religious ceremonies. It was the Swiss army knife of ancient attire, simple, adaptable, and indispensable. Yet, despite the utilitarian grind, the artistry of textiles still shone through. Patterns like the paisley, originating from the Persian bode, were not only visually appealing, but laden with meaning. The teardrop shape was said to represent the convergence of life and eternity, a poetic touch to an otherwise everyday item. Even the simplest garment could carry a story, a lineage of craftsmanship passed down through generations. So as the afternoon sun casts shadows over the bustling market, we find that textiles in ancient India were far more than mere threads woven together. They were the fabric of society itself, intricately linked with culture, economy, and identity. Each piece told a story of its own, of beauty and exploitation, of artistry and labor, of a world where every thread held a deeper meaning. Yet, as rich as this tapestry is, there's more to explore. The loom of history is still spinning, and the threads of our story continue to weave their way across time. Stay tuned as we continue this vibrant journey into the heart of ancient India's textile legacy. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ancient Indian landscape, the legacy of these textiles begins to unfurl across the globe like a bolt of silk in a bustling market. The story of Indian textiles isn't just confined to the bazaars of Gujarat or the looms of Tamil Nadu. Oh no, these threads wove their way into the very fabric of history, influencing fashion trends from the courts of Europe to the bustling streets of modern cities. Let's take a trip back to the 17th century, when Indian textiles made their grand entrance onto the European stage. Imagine the scene. European traders, eyes wide with awe and greed, stumbling upon these vibrant, intricate fabrics that seemed to defy the dreary woolen monotony of their wardrobes. It was love at first sight, and soon calico and chintz became the must-have items among the European elite. The demand was so high that these fabrics practically flew off the ships faster than you could say, past the tea and crumpets. But here's the kicker. These textiles didn't just waltz into European fashion without causing a stir. Their arrival sparked a sartorial revolution, sending ripples through economic policies and social norms. The East India Company capitalized on this craze, turning textiles into one of the most lucrative exports from the subcontinent. By the mid-1700, it's estimated that over 25% of the company's profits came from Indian textiles alone. Talk about a cloth with a hefty price tag. Yet, as with all great love stories, there was a dark side. European weavers, feeling the pinch as their domestic industries faced stiff competition, weren't exactly thrilled. This led to protectionist measures like the Calico Acts in Britain, which banned the import of printed cotton textiles to protect local industry. Romantic, right? Nothing says love like a good old-fashioned trade ban. While the Europeans were busy wrapping themselves in the allure of Indian textiles, let's not ignore the paradox of the mystical East narrative. The West's fascination with the so-called exotic East had a tendency to romanticize and oversimplify. Indian weavers were often painted as mystical artisans, working in a dreamlike haze of incense and spirituality. The reality, less incense, more intense. These weavers were master craftsmen, yes, but they were also practical, innovative, and resilient, working long hours to meet the insatiable demand of global markets. Fast forward to today, where the echoes of this legacy are still heard loud and clear. The techniques pioneered by these ancient weavers have not only survived but thrived, adapting to the modern world's demands for sustainability and ethical production. In an era where fast fashion dominates, there's a growing appreciation for craftsmanship and sustainable practices, concepts that were second nature to those ancient artisans. The modern textile industry, worth an eye-watering $3 trillion globally, owes a debt to these early innovators. Their methods of natural dyeing and hand weaving are being revived as consumers become more aware of the environmental impact of their clothing choices. It's a poignant reminder that sometimes looking back is the best way forward. But before we wrap up this textile tapestry, let's debunk one last myth, that the legacy of Indian textiles is solely an Asian story. It's a global phenomenon, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of beauty. From the palaces of Mughal emperors to the runways of Paris Fashion Week, these textiles have transcended borders and time, weaving a narrative that is as rich and complex as the threads themselves. So as you settle in for the night, perhaps with your own quilt or shawl draped over your shoulders, spare a thought for the weavers of ancient India. Their legacy is woven into the very fabric of our lives, a colorful reminder of the past's enduring influence on the present. As we nod off, we carry with us the understanding that these threads are not just artifacts of history, but vibrant strands that continue to connect us across cultures and centuries. Sleep tight, wrapped in the knowledge that the loom of history is ever spinning, crafting stories that will be told for generations to come. In the bustling heart of ancient Rome, where the air was thick with the scent of ambition and olive oil. A young boy named Marcus was being groomed to become one of history's most intriguing philosopher emperors. Born April 26, 121 C, to a family as wealthy as it was influential, Marcus Aurelius didn't exactly start life with a silver spoon. Think more along the lines of a golden laurel wreath. His familial connections were the stuff of Roman high society legends. His grandfather was the equivalent of the 1% elite, wielding serious influence and coin, enough to buy a small army or a really fancy toga, whichever was in vogue. Now, you might think that being born into wealth meant the young Marcus spent his days lounging in luxury. But oh no, Roman elite education was a grueling boot camp for the mind. Marcus's early education was a smorgasbord of philosophy, rhetoric, and law. It was a world where your social status was as much a function of your intellect as your money. The Romans might have had a few questionable hygiene practices, but they took their learning seriously. Marcus was tutored by the best, including the famed rhetorician Fronto, whose teaching style was probably less about gentle encouragement and more about, why haven't you memorized those Latin declensions yet? Speaking of Latin, it's worth mentioning that Roman education was as much about memorization as it was about understanding. Imagine memorizing endless Latin declensions, day in and day out, like some kind of ancient version of a pop quiz that never ends. It's no wonder that Roman humor often involved wordplay. When you're knee-deep in the minutiae of a complex language, you need something to laugh about. It was a bit like trying to find humor in tax codes, challenging but not impossible. Marcus's early encounters with philosophy were not just academic exercises, they were shaping his worldview. The Stoic philosophy, which would later define his reign, was about accepting the world as it is and finding peace within oneself. This wasn't just theoretical for Marcus. Growing up in a house where political intrigue was as common as bread and circuses, he learned early on that life was unpredictable, and control was often an illusion. It's this kind of thinking that later helped him maintain his composure during the less glamorous parts of being emperor, like plagues and wars, because nothing says, "Good morning," quite like a barbarian invasion. But let's not skip over the comedic realities of Roman schooling. The Romans had a peculiar way of blending the cerebral with the absurd. Picture young Marcus, dressed in his toga, trying to keep a straight face, as his teachers droned on about the virtues of Cicero or the intricacies of Roman law, all while dodging the occasional flying wax tablet, a common projectile in the Roman classroom when debates got a little too heated. And then there were the public recitations, where students had to impress not only their teachers, but also their peers with their rhetorical prowess. No pressure, just your entire social standing on the line. This rigorous education wasn't just about surviving the classroom. It was about preparing Marcus for the complex world of Roman politics and leadership. There's a reason why the Romans valued oratory skills so highly. Being able to talk your way out of a sticky situation was arguably as valuable as wielding a sword. Marcus's education gave him the tools to navigate the treacherous waters of the Roman Senate, where alliances were as stable as a sandcastle at high tide. All these early experiences were crucial in shaping Marcus's philosophical outlook and leadership style. His penchant for reflection and contemplation was not just a personal quirk, but a necessary survival skill in the chaotic world of Roman politics. And while the life of a Roman student was no picnic, it was the forge where Marcus's character was tempered, preparing him for the weighty task of ruling one of history's greatest empires with wisdom and occasionally a dash of wry humor. Transitioning from the rigorous academic boot camp of his youth, Marcus Aurelius soon found himself on the fast track to power, like a philosopher accidentally stumbling onto the set of a political drama. Rome in the 2nd century CE was no picnic. It was more akin to a grand banquet with the occasional food fight, where the stakes were higher than a senator's toga hem. And when you're navigating this kind of milieu, it helps to have a co-star, or in Marcus's case, a co-emperor. Enter Lucius Verus, the yin to Marcus's yang, or perhaps more accurately, the party to his philosophy. In 161 C, Marcus was thrust into the spotlight alongside Lucius Verus, marking the first time Rome had co-emperors. This wasn't some buddy cop arrangement, though. It was a strategic move by the Senate and Emperor Antoninus Pius. Think of it less as a bromance and more as a cautious attempt to balance power. Marcus, with his stoic philosophy and penchant for introspection, was like the calm center of a storm. Verus, on the other hand, let's just say if Rome had a nightlife scene, he would have been its poster boy. Verus was known for his love of lavish parties and extravagant games, making him the ancient world's equivalent of a rock star, with a penchant for gladiatorial contests. The partnership was intriguing, a balancing act between Marcus's philosophical inclinations and Verus's more hedonistic tendencies. While Marcus was busy contemplating the nature of the universe and writing what would become his famous Meditations. Imagine a diary, but with more existential pondering. Verus was off leading military campaigns in the East, enjoying the finer things in life, and occasionally reminding everyone that moderation was a concept best left to his co-emperor. Yet, despite their differences, they managed to keep the Roman Empire's wheels turning, all while dealing with the sort of political intrigue that would make a modern-day soap opera look like a children's show. Economically, the Roman Empire during their reign was a behemoth, stretching from the sandy dunes of Egypt to the chilly borders of Britain. It was like the ancient version of a multinational corporation, complete with supply chains, trade routes, and the occasional hostile takeover. The Roman economy was largely driven by agriculture, but trade was the empire's lifeblood, with goods flowing in and out like a well-oiled machine. Roman currency, the denarius, was the ancient world's dollar bill, though inflation was starting to rear its ugly head, a problem as timeless as the emperor's toga. But let's talk politics. Marcus and Verus had to navigate a senate that was as much theater as it was government. Picture a room full of togas, where alliances shifted faster than the sands of the Sahara. Marcus's philosophical leanings influenced his decision-making, often opting for reasoned debate over brute force, a novel idea in a time when the sword was as persuasive as any argument. Verus, meanwhile, played the role of the charismatic leader, charming the populace and keeping the legions in high spirits, literally, thanks to the wine. However, not everything was wine and roses. The empire faced significant challenges, like the Parthian War, 161-166 C, where Verus led the Roman legions to victory, returning with much fanfare and a nasty surprise. The returning soldiers brought back the Antonine Plague, a pandemic that swept through the empire faster than rumors of a Senate scandal. It's estimated that up to 5 million people perished, a stark reminder that even the mightiest empire was vulnerable to forces beyond its control. Through it all, Marcus remained steadfast, his philosophical teachings providing a beacon in turbulent times. His stoic beliefs taught him to accept what he could not change and focus on his own actions, a mindset that undoubtedly served him well when faced with the dual challenges of ruling an empire and surviving the whims of fate. Meanwhile, Verus's approach was more about finding joy in life's chaos, a perspective that perhaps made the harsh realities of leadership a little more bearable. This partnership, though unconventional, allowed Marcus to focus on governance and philosophy while Verus handled the military matters. It was a division of labor that, despite its oddities, worked surprisingly well. The Roman Empire continued to thrive, its borders secure and its people relatively content, even as they coped with the occasional barbarian skirmish or economic hiccup. As we pull back the curtain on this era, it's clear that the co-emperorship was less about shared power and more about shared responsibility. Marcus's dedication to his Stoic principles helped him navigate the complexities of leadership, offering a lesson in the power of philosophy as a guide in uncertain times. Verus, meanwhile, showed that a bit of charm and indulgence could go a long way in keeping the empire's spirits high, even if it occasionally meant a toga party or two. Ultimately, the story of Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus is a reminder that leadership comes in many forms, and sometimes the most effective partnerships are those that embrace their differences. As the empire hummed along, its two emperors proved that while Rome might have been built on power and conquest, it was sustained by wisdom and occasionally a good party. And as for Marcus, his reign was just beginning, a prelude to a legacy that would endure long after the last toga was hung up and the final scroll of his Meditations was penned. As Marcus Aurelius settled into his role as co-emperor, the Roman Empire was about to face a new set of challenges, ones that would test the mettle of any leader Philosopher or not. The stage was set for the Marcomannic Wars, a series of brutal conflicts that would span nearly 2 decades, from 166 to 180 CE. These wars were less about grand conquests and more about survival in the face of relentless barbarian invasions. If you think Game of Thrones had epic battles, wait until you hear about Marcus's campaigns against the Germanic tribes. The Marcomanni, Quadi, and other tribes were causing Rome no end of grief. These were not your average neighbors borrowing sugar. They were more into pillaging frontier towns. It was a harsh reminder that the Roman Empire's borders were anything but secure. Defending an empire that stretched across 3 continents was no small feat, especially when you're coordinating armies across vast distances without so much as a compass, let alone a GPS. Forget Google Maps. Marcus had to rely on scouts, messengers, and good old-fashioned guesswork. Logistically, moving Roman legions was like organizing a massive, ancient version of a rock band tour, complete with roadies and a lot of heavy lifting. The Roman army was a formidable force, but even they needed supplies, food, weapons, and, let's face it, wine. The supply lines stretched over hundreds of miles, and keeping them intact was a Herculean task. Picture this: a Roman quartermaster frantically trying to ensure that grain shipments didn't go missing somewhere in the backwoods of Germania, all while dealing with the equivalent of ancient traffic jams, carts and wagons on muddy roads. Yet Marcus, ever the stoic, approached these challenges with a calm and methodical demeanor. His philosophical training must have helped when it came to accepting the things he couldn't control, like the weather or the whims of tribal leaders. Unlike the Hollywood version of Roman warfare, which often depicts endless victorious charges, Marcus's campaigns were a mix of strategic retreats and hard-won victories. The Romans might have been the empire that built roads, but they also knew when to take a detour. One of the greatest myths about the Roman military is its supposed invincibility. Sure, the legions were tough as nails, but they were far from unbeatable. Marcus's reign saw several strategic retreats, which were crucial for regrouping and preserving his forces. A retreat wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a tactical decision to fight another day. Even Julius Caesar himself would have given a nod of approval at such pragmatism. Now, you might wonder why Marcus didn't just send in the cavalry and call it a day. Well, the cavalry was there, but so were the economic realities. Wars are expensive. Think more gold coins than you could fit in a toga pocket. Keeping the legions paid and fed was a constant concern. Inflation was already creeping into the Roman economy, and maintaining a standing army wasn't helping matters. Resources had to be managed carefully, and Marcus, with his philosophical and economic acumen, seemed to understand that better than most. Marcus's leadership style during the Marcomannic Wars was a blend of diplomacy and military prowess. He knew that outright conquest wasn't always the answer, and at times he opted for treaties and alliances with certain tribes. It was a bit like playing chess on a board, where some pieces occasionally decided to change sides. His ability to negotiate and find common ground with potential adversaries was a testament to his philosophical mindset, a reminder that sometimes the sword isn't mightier than the pen, or in Marcus's case, the scroll. Of course, the human element was never far from view. The soldiers, far from home and often fighting in brutal conditions, had to be kept motivated. Marcus's philosophical writings, particularly his Meditations, served as a source of inspiration, offering guidance on resilience and inner peace amidst chaos. These texts were like a pep talk from the emperor himself, reminding the troops, and perhaps himself, that endurance and virtue were the way forward. The Marcomannic Wars weren't just about military maneuvers, they were about the shifting tides of Roman identity. As the empire grappled with these external threats, there was a gradual realization that Rome's borders couldn't be expanded indefinitely. Marcus's reign marked a critical turning point, where maintaining the empire's integrity became more important than its expansion. It was a sobering reality, one that signaled the beginning of a new era in Roman history. But let's not forget the humor amidst the chaos. The Roman legions, with their strict discipline, were not immune to moments of levity. Imagine soldiers swapping tales of exaggerated bravery over campfires, or the occasional prank involving a centurion's helmet and a strategically placed amphora of wine. Such moments of camaraderie were essential for morale, proving that even in the face of adversity, the Romans knew how to find a laugh. As the Marcomannic Wars dragged on, Marcus's commitment to his philosophical principles never wavered. His stoicism wasn't just a personal creed. It was a leadership tool that helped him navigate the myriad challenges of his reign. The wars may have tested his resolve, but they also provided a stage for him to demonstrate that true strength lies in wisdom, patience, and the courage to face life's uncertainties with grace. In the grand tapestry of Roman history, Marcus Aurelius's military campaigns were less about conquest and more about survival and adaptation. They were a testament to the resilience of the Roman Empire and the man who led it through one of its most turbulent periods. The battles fought during the Marcomannic Wars were not just physical, but also philosophical, as Marcus's Stoic teachings continued to illuminate the path forward, proving that even in the darkest times, there's always a glimmer of light. And with that, Rome marched on, its legacy unfolding in ways that Marcus could only have imagined. As Marcus Aurelius and the Roman legions trudged through the mud and mayhem of the Marcomannic Wars, the emperor found solace not in the clash of swords, but in the quiet scribbling of his thoughts. Imagine this. Amidst the cacophony of war cries and the clatter of armor, Marcus was hunched over papyrus, jotting down musings that would eventually compile into his famed Meditations. Talk about multitasking, juggling war strategy by day and existential philosophy by night. Meditations wasn't just your run-of-the-mill diary. It was a deep dive into the psyche of a ruler who was grappling with the chaos of the world around him. Written in Greek, not Latin, which was the intellectual flex of the time, because why use your mother tongue when you can impress with a second language? These writings reveal a man striving for inner peace, while the world outside was anything but serene. Stoicism, the philosophy at the core of Marcus's reflections, was all about maintaining calm in the face of life's turbulence. Think of it as the ancient version of keeping calm and carrying on, minus the motivational poster. Now, let's consider the irony here. While Marcus was waxing poetic about tranquility and the virtues of self-control, he was simultaneously orchestrating military maneuvers and dealing with barbarian invasions. It's like trying to meditate in the middle of a rock concert. Yet, this juxtaposition is precisely what makes his Meditations so compelling. They offer a glimpse into how a leader could maintain a sense of personal serenity even when everything else was chaotic. But why did Marcus turn to Stoicism in the first place? The answer lies in the political and social climate of the time. The Roman Empire, a sprawling expanse of cultures and conflicts, was a pressure cooker of political intrigue. Marcus, steeped in this cauldron, needed a philosophy that could ground him. Stoicism, with its focus on rationality and self-discipline, was the perfect antidote to the empire's unpredictability. It taught him to focus on what he could control, his actions and reactions, and let go of the rest. This mindset was crucial when dealing with the Senate, a body as reliable as a weather forecast in ancient Britannia. The political reality of Marcus's reign was as turbulent as the military one. The Senate, while ostensibly a governing body, was often more concerned with personal gain than public good. Senators were known for their ability to switch allegiances faster than you could say denarius, and navigating this landscape required a deft touch. Marcus's Stoic beliefs likely helped him keep his cool when everything else was burning harder than a Roman summer. Economically, the empire was a behemoth, but not without its cracks. Inflation was the silent enemy, eroding the value of the denarius and stretching the empire's resources thin. Marcus's philosophical writings didn't directly address these economic woes, but his emphasis on frugality and discipline certainly resonated with a populace feeling the pinch. It's a bit like an emperor's version of a TED talk on mindful spending. Stoicism's appeal wasn't just philosophical, it was practical. Marcus's emphasis on duty and virtue translated into leadership that valued the collective good over individual gain. He believed in serving the empire, not ruling it for personal glory, a refreshing notion in a time when emperors were often more interested in statues of themselves than the welfare of their citizens. This selflessness, combined with his philosophical insights, made him a ruler who was respected, if not always loved, a political reality that has hardly changed in 2 millennia. Beyond the political and economic spheres, Marcus's Meditations provide timeless insights into human nature. They remind us that the struggles of the 2nd century CE are not so different from those of today, whether it's dealing with personal disappointment or the betrayal of friends. Marcus's writings offer a stoic blueprint for handling life's curveballs. He mused on the fleeting nature of fame and power, recognizing that legacy is built not on monuments, but on deeds, a truth as relevant now as it was then. Yet, behind the philosophical grandeur, there's a more human side to Marcus's writings. They reveal a man who was acutely aware of his own mortality and the impermanence of all things. In an era where life expectancy was barely pushing 50, Marcus's reflections on death were not morbid, but rather a call to live virtuously. His thoughts were like a Roman road map, guiding him through the moral quagmire of leadership. And let's not sugarcoat it. Life as a Roman emperor was a high-stakes game. Marcus's stoicism was not just a philosophical choice, but a survival mechanism. By accepting the things he couldn't change, he was able to focus on what truly mattered, leading the empire through one of its most tumultuous periods with grace and dignity. It's as if he was saying, I can't stop the barbarians at the gates, but I can ensure that I meet them with fortitude. In the end, Marcus Aurelius's contributions to philosophy extend far beyond his own time. His meditations have survived the centuries, continually inspiring those seeking wisdom in times of trouble. The contrast between the peace of his writings and the chaos of his reality remains a powerful testament to the enduring power of Stoic thought. As we wade through our own modern-day challenges, perhaps we can take a page from Marcus's scroll and find our own inner calm amidst the storm. As we leave Marcus for now, remember that his story is not yet finished. The philosopher emperor has more lessons to impart, and his journey through the labyrinth of leadership is far from over. Stay tuned as we unravel the next chapter of Marcus Aurelius's life, where his philosophical insights continue to guide him through the trials of empire and beyond. As we wrap up our historical joyride through the life of Marcus Aurelius, let's take a moment to question the enduring allure of his image as the philosopher king. Marcus, with his stoic musings and strategic retreats, has been immortalized as the ideal ruler, a beacon of wisdom in a toga, if you will. Yet, for all the philosophical fanfare, the gritty realities of his reign reveal a far more complex picture. It's time to peel back the laurel leaves and see what lies beneath the marble statue. First, let's talk legacy. Marcus Aurelius's reign was marked by a series of economic and military challenges that were about as welcome as a toga malfunction at a Senate meeting. Empire's treasury was stretched thin by the ongoing Marcomannic Wars, which, let's face it, were less about glorious conquest and more about keeping the barbarians at bay. These conflicts drained resources and tested the empire's infrastructure. The Roman economy, while vast, was beginning to show cracks, much like a poorly constructed aqueduct. Inflation was creeping in, prices were rising, and the denarius was losing its shine faster than you could say, veni, vidi, vici. Yet, Marcus's philosophical writings, particularly his emphasis on frugality and duty, offered a framework for navigating these economic woes. His commitment to Stoicism was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided him with a moral compass. On the other, it sometimes led him to accept the status quo rather than challenge it. In a world where decisive action was often necessary, Marcus's penchant for contemplation could be both a strength and a weakness. It's like being stuck on a philosophical seesaw, forever balancing thought and action. But let's not romanticize the idea of the philosopher king too much. For all his virtues, Marcus wasn't immune to the political realities of succession. Enter Commodus, Marcus's son and heir, who was as well suited to ruling Rome as a gladiator was to running a library. Commodus's reign, beginning in 180 CE, quickly descended into chaos, as if Rome had gone from a highbrow philosophical symposium to a rowdy gladiatorial match overnight. The irony: Marcus, the Stoic who preached moderation and wisdom, left the empire in the hands of a ruler who preferred excess and spectacle. Commodus was more interested in reenacting Hercules' greatest hits than in addressing the empire's mounting issues. Under Commodus, the Roman Empire experienced a period of decline that historians often describe with the kind of language usually reserved for natural disasters. His penchant for extravagance and his detachment from the actual governance made him about as popular as a lead toga. The economy, already fragile, was further strained by his mismanagement. Commodus's rule became a tragicomic spectacle, with more focus on lavish games and self-glorification than on the empire's pressing needs. It was like Rome had its own reality TV emperor, minus the camera crew. The contrast between father and son couldn't be starker. Where Marcus offered stoic reflection, Commodus delivered grandiosity. It's tempting to see Commodus as the antithesis of everything Marcus stood for, yet his disastrous reign serves as a reminder that even the greatest legacies can be undone by a single poor succession choice. It's a historical lesson in the importance of careful planning, because leaving your empire to someone whose main qualifications are a family resemblance and a fondness for gladiatorial games is about as wise as appointing a lion as head of the Senate. Despite the chaos that followed, Marcus's philosophical legacy endured. His meditations, a personal refuge during times of turmoil, have continued to captivate readers through the centuries. The appeal of Stoicism in modern times is a testament to its timeless relevance. In an age where the world seems perpetually on the brink of one crisis or another, Marcus's teachings on resilience and inner peace resonate more than ever. His reflections on the impermanence of power and the value of virtue have found a new audience in those seeking solace from the chaos of contemporary life. Yet, let's not forget that Marcus's Stoicism was born out of necessity as much as philosophy. The empire he ruled was a vast, unwieldy beast, and maintaining its stability required more than just military might or economic acumen. It required an understanding of human nature. Marcus's insights into the fickle nature of fortune and the importance of self-control were not just philosophical musings. They were survival tactics in a world where the ground could shift beneath your sandals at any moment. So, as we close the scroll on Marcus Aurelius, what can we learn from the philosopher emperor? Perhaps it's that true leadership is a balancing act, a dance between contemplation and action, between idealism and pragmatism. Marcus's reign, with all its challenges and contradictions, offers a rich tapestry of lessons for both rulers and the ruled. His life reminds us that while the philosopher king is an appealing notion, the reality of ruling is far messier. The mark of a great leader isn't just in the victories won or the territories expanded, but in the wisdom imparted and the resilience shown in the face of adversity. In the end, Marcus Aurelius stands as a testament to the enduring power of philosophy to guide us through life's tumultuous seas. His Stoic principles offer a compass for navigating both personal and collective challenges, proving that even in an empire built on conquest, the greatest strength often lies in the quiet resolve of the mind. As we navigate our own modern-day trials, perhaps we can find inspiration in Marcus's legacy, a reminder that even amidst the chaos, there's always room for a little philosophy. And who knows, maybe we'll discover that the true measure of a philosopher king isn't in the empire they leave behind, but in the wisdom they pass on to future generations. If you'd been kicking around the ancient world in the 4th century, you'd have seen a whole lot of action in a little corner known as Byzantium. Now, this wasn't some backwater village where nothing ever happened. Oh no, this was the hot new spot for a little empire you might have heard of, the Byzantine Empire. It all kicked off in 330 CE when Constantine the Great, think of him as the Steve Jobs of his day, minus the turtleneck, decided to give the city a glow-up and rename it Constantinople. He wasn't just thinking about aesthetics. This was a strategic power move. Constantinople was like the junction where East met West, a cultural crossroads with a real estate price that probably made the landlords drool. Tucked snugly between the Black Sea and the Aegean, it was the perfect spot for trade routes crisscrossing the empire. And if you were a merchant with silk or spices, you'd know this was the place to be. The location was as prime as it gets, allowing commerce to flow like wine at a Roman banquet. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this empire was like the ultimate hybrid car, running on the fuel of both Roman governance and Greek culture. Constantine, in a move worthy of a political chess grandmaster, established Constantinople as the new capital of the Roman Empire. But don't get it twisted. This wasn't just a Roman city with some Greek columns thrown in for good measure. This was a city that embraced its Greek heritage like a hipster embraces vintage vinyl. The Byzantines spoke Greek, thought like Greeks, and even philosophized like Greeks. You see, the Romans, for all their engineering prowess and military might, were pragmatic to the core. They borrowed what worked and made it their own, like remixing a classic song into a chart-topping hit. And boy, hit the jackpot with Greek culture. Philosophy, art, and literature. If it was Greek, it was gold. The Byzantine Empire became this melting pot where Roman law met Greek intellectualism, creating a unique cultural brew that would have a lasting impact on Eastern Europe. But let's not put on rose-colored glasses just yet. Sure, the Byzantine Empire was this beacon of culture and innovation, but it also had its fair share of messiness. Just like any other empire, it was plagued by political intrigue and power struggles that would make Game of Thrones look like a playground spat. Emperors came and went, often exiting not so gracefully, thanks to a handy bit of arsenic or a well-placed dagger. Power was a fickle friend, and alliances shifted faster than a Byzantine could say, Hagia Sophia. Speaking of which, let's pause for a moment to appreciate that architectural wonder. The Hagia Sophia was more than just a church. It was a statement. Built under Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century, it was a marvel of engineering and artistry, boasting a dome so grand it seemed to float in defiance of gravity. This was the kind of place that made you look up and think, wow, they really knew how to build things back then. It was a symbol of the empire's wealth, piety, and its insatiable appetite for grandeur. But back to Constantine. This guy wasn't just a builder, he was a visionary. By founding Constantinople, wasn't just creating a new capital. He was laying down the foundations for an empire that would outlast Rome itself. The Byzantine Empire didn't just survive, it thrived, lasting for over 1,000 years, until 1453. That's longer than most modern nations have been around. And while Rome might have been sacked by barbarian hordes, Constantinople held its ground, a testament to its strategic brilliance and the resilience of its people. Now, you might be thinking, what about the myths? The tales of Byzantine decadence and intrigue? Well, they're not all fiction. The Byzantines loved their pageantry. Their court ceremonies were elaborate affairs, with costumes that would rival any Met Gala. And yes, they had their scandals. Emperors were blinded, exiled, or worse. It was a political scene where playing your cards right or wrong could mean the difference between wearing a crown or losing your head. So, there you have it, the origins of the Byzantine Empire, a place where Roman efficiency met Greek sophistication, set against the backdrop of a city that was as much a character in the empire's story as any emperor or general. It was a place of contrasts and contradictions, where the past and future collided in a spectacular display that would leave an indelible mark on Eastern Europe. As we dive deeper into this empire's rich tapestry, remember that history is rarely simple or tidy, but always fascinating. And the Byzantine Empire, with its blend of brilliance and chaos, is no exception. So, with the Byzantine Empire strutting its stuff on the global stage, it didn't take long before its cultural influence started to ripple outwards, like a particularly chatty neighbor at a block party. One of its most significant exports, Orthodox Christianity, a spiritual package deal that came complete with stunning religious art and architecture. But before we jump into the architectural wonders, let's talk about a big moment. The conversion of Kievan Rus under Prince Vladimir in 988 CE. Picture this. Vladimir, who was initially a pagan with a penchant for parties that would make even the most debauched reveler blush, suddenly found faith. But why Christianity and why from Byzantium? Well, it wasn't just about spiritual enlightenment. The conversion was as much a savvy political maneuver as it was a religious awakening. Vladimir was shopping around for a religion that could unify his people and bolster his power. Judaism, Islam, and Western Christianity were all contenders, but Orthodox Christianity won out, partly because of Byzantium's dazzling cultural allure. And let's be honest, the Hagia Sophia was an architectural siren call you simply couldn't ignore. And it's not like Vladimir was going to join the ranks of the circumcised or give up his pork sausages. Vladimir's decision to convert wasn't just a personal affair. It was a kingdom-wide baptism, and by that, I mean literally. Thousands of his subjects were herded into the Dnieper River to be baptized en masse. Talk about a splashy entrance into the Christian world. This mass conversion wasn't just about saving souls. It was about aligning Kievan Rus with the Byzantine Empire, ensuring political alliances, and opening up trade routes. It was the medieval equivalent of joining a prestigious club to rub shoulders with the elite. But what did this mean for the Slavic lands? For starters, Byzantine art and architecture started popping up like Byzantine art and architecture pop-up shops. Churches were now built with domes that seemed to defy gravity, adorned with mosaics that turned religious stories into visual symphonies. Icons, those small, portable pieces of religious art, became the Instagram posts of their day, spreading Orthodox Christianity's ethos far and wide. And let's not forget the Cyrillic alphabet, which was developed by Byzantine missionaries Cyril and Methodius. Imagine trying to spread your religious texts when half the people couldn't even read them. So they created a new alphabet to remedy that little hiccup. This wasn't just an alphabet. It was a tool of cultural transformation that would shape Slavic languages for centuries to come. Now, here's where things get particularly juicy. While Byzantium was exporting its culture, it was also importing a fair bit of intrigue and drama. The Byzantines were masters of political theatre, and their court rituals were as extravagant as they were effective at reinforcing imperial power. Imagine a state ceremony with more pomp than a royal wedding and more protocol than a state dinner. The Byzantines knew how to put on a show, and this theatricality was not lost on their new allies. The Byzantine influence wasn't just about religion or pretty buildings. It was a full-on cultural invasion. The Slavic nobility began to mimic Byzantine court customs, adopting the same elaborate ceremonies and even fashion. Byzantine-style robes became all the rage among the Eastern European elite, proving once again that power dressing isn't just about looking good, it's about making a statement. But let's not romanticize this too much. The adoption of Byzantine culture and religion wasn't all smooth sailing. Local traditions and pagan practices didn't just vanish overnight. There was resistance, and plenty of it. In some areas, Christianity was fused with existing beliefs, creating a unique cultural blend that was more of a religious smoothie than a straight-up conversion. This wasn't a clean sweep. It was a messy, complex process, full of compromises and adaptations. The Byzantine Empire, for all its cultural magnificence, was also a bit of a mess politically. Its internal strife was legendary, with emperors getting deposed more frequently than the latest smartphone model. Yet somehow, it managed to project an image of stability and grandeur to its neighbors. This duality, glorious on the outside, chaotic on the inside, was part of its allure. The Slavic lands, while adopting Byzantine culture, also learned to navigate the intricacies of power politics, a skill that would be crucial in the turbulent centuries to follow. So, what's the takeaway from all this? The Byzantine Empire wasn't just a beacon of culture and religion. It was a masterclass in political maneuvering, cultural diplomacy, and yes, a bit of theatrical flair. It spread its influence across Eastern Europe like a particularly persuasive influencer, leaving a legacy that would shape the region long after the empire itself had faded into history. And as we continue to unravel this fascinating tapestry, remember this. History isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a story of people, power, and the sometimes messy, often surprising ways in which cultures collide and transform. Stay tuned, because the Byzantine saga is far from over. As the Byzantine Empire flexed its muscles on the cultural front, it was also busy playing Monopoly on a global scale. With Constantinople as its boardwalk, this empire wasn't just about regal ceremonies and glittering mosaics. It was a bustling hub of international trade, the medieval world's Wall Street with a dash of the Silk Road. When it came to commerce, Byzantium was like that friend who always knows where to find the best deals, whether it was Persian silk, Indian spices, or Chinese porcelain. Let's talk solidus, the gold standard of the ancient world. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill coinage. It was the Bitcoin of its day, trusted from the streets of Rome to the markets of Baghdad. Introduced by Constantine the Great around 312 CE, the solidus was a golden ticket, literally, weighing in at about 5 grams of pure gold. While other currencies floundered and inflated like unsupervised soufflés, the solidus held its value for nearly 700 years. Imagine that kind of monetary stability today. It was the currency equivalent of a rock star, respected and sought after, ensuring Byzantium's economic clout. Trade routes snaked their way through Constantinople like VIP access paths at a concert, linking Europe and Asia in a network that was as intricate as a Byzantine mosaic. Spices traveled from the East Indies, silks from China, and precious metals from Africa. All roads led to the city that was the apple of the ancient world's eye. But it wasn't just about goods. Ideas, technologies, and cultures were exchanged with every transaction, turning Constantinople into a colossal melting pot of innovation. It was the Instagram of its day, where trends were set and the latest in thing could be found. Byzantine diplomacy was another feather in its opulent cap. The empire's ambassadors were like the James Bonds of their time, suave and strategic, skilled in the art of negotiation and subterfuge. Treaties were signed, alliances were forged, and sometimes a friendly marriage proposal sealed a deal. The Byzantines knew that keeping the peace was often better for business than wielding a sword. Their diplomatic efforts were less about altruism and more about ensuring that the trade routes remained open and profitable. But let's not get swept away by the grandeur without acknowledging the storm clouds on the horizon. The Byzantine economy, for all its glittering success stories, was not immune to turbulence. Wars, famines, and plagues were the grim reapers of economic stability. The empire had to constantly juggle its resources, often engaging in a high-stakes game of economic whack-a-mole. And then there was the matter of taxation. The Byzantine tax system was the bureaucratic equivalent of an overcomplicated IKEA assembly guide. It was a labyrinthine mess of tributes, duties, and levies that would have made even the most hardened tax collector break a sweat. Yet, it was this very complexity that kept the empire's coffers filled, at least most of the time. The rural peasantry, the backbone of the Byzantine economy, often found themselves crushed under the weight of these taxes, creating a social tension that simmered beneath the empire's gilded exterior. Now, let's peek behind the curtain of opulence to the economic struggles that often lay hidden from sight. The Byzantine Empire, for all its wealth, wasn't always the picture of fiscal health. In times of crisis, the government resorted to debasing the currency, reducing the gold content of the solidus to stretch the treasury further. It was a bit like watering down wine to make it last longer, effective in the short term, but ultimately unsatisfying. By the 11th century, the empire faced mounting pressures, military campaigns against formidable foes, internal power struggles that resembled a high-stakes game of musical chairs, and the occasional natural disaster that seemed to have it out for Byzantium. These challenges weren't just blips on the radar. They were seismic events that shook the very foundations of the economy. Yet, despite these hurdles, the Byzantine Empire managed to maintain its status as a beacon of commerce and culture. This resilience was thanks in part to its strategic geographic position and the sheer tenacity of its people. Constantinople remained an economic powerhouse, its markets bustling with activity, even as the empire wrestled with the complexities of maintaining its vast territories and diverse populace. The economy of Byzantium was a dynamic beast, capable of soaring to great heights, but also prone to sudden and dramatic crashes. It was a constant balancing act, a dance between prosperity and decline, much like the ebb and flow of the tides that lapped at its shores. The empire's economic policies, though often criticized for their complexity and occasional short-sightedness, were a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability that characterized Byzantine governance. So, as we stand at this commercial crossroads, it's essential to remember that the Byzantine Empire was more than just a relic of glorious architecture and religious fervor. It was a living, breathing entity, driven by the very human desires for wealth, power, and influence. The Byzantines were masterful players in the game of global commerce, their legacy of trade and diplomacy echoing through the annals of history. As we continue our journey through the Byzantine saga, let's keep an eye on the economic currents that shaped not only the empire's fortunes, but also the very course of Eastern European history. The story is far from over, and there are still many twists and turns to explore in this captivating narrative. Speaking of twists and turns, the Byzantine Empire's political and military maneuvers were like a high-stakes chess game, played on a board that stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates. Sure, the Byzantines were known for their dazzling culture and bustling economy, but you didn't stick around for a millennium without knowing how to handle a sword, or better yet, how to convince someone else to put theirs down. This was an empire that could charm and baffle in equal measure, and its diplomatic prowess was second to none. Byzantine diplomacy wasn't just about sending emissaries with a nice gift basket and a polite note. It was a complex tapestry of alliances, treaties, and yes, a fair bit of espionage. They were masters of the long game, always thinking several moves ahead. Ambassadors were dispatched with the precision of a Swiss watch, forging alliances that were as much about survival as they were about expansion. One famous example, the marriage of Anna Porphyrogenita to Grand Prince Vladimir of Kiev. This wasn't just a union of two people. It was a strategic partnership that ensured Kievan Rus would be in the Byzantine corner, at least for a while. But it wasn't all sunshine and royal weddings. The Byzantines often found themselves in the thick of conflict, their armies clashing with foes both foreign and domestic. And when it came to military tactics, they had a few tricks up their sleeves that would make any military strategist sit up and take notes. Enter Greek fire, a substance so legendary it might as well have been conjured by Merlin himself. This Byzantine concoction, hurled at enemies with the glee of a kid tossing water balloons, was an incendiary weapon that burned even on water. Good luck putting that out with your standard medieval fire brigade. The exact formula for Greek fire was a well-guarded state secret, akin to the Colonel's secret blend of herbs and spices. And while historians debate its composition, its effectiveness was never in question. It became the stuff of nightmares for enemy fleets, giving Byzantium a naval edge that helped keep the barbarians, and anyone else with a grudge, at bay. But let's not pretend the Byzantine military was invincible. The empire had its share of defeats, and its reputation as an impenetrable fortress was more myth than reality. Take the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, for instance. The Seljuk Turks handed the Byzantines a crushing defeat, capturing Emperor Romano's Roman IV Diogenes in the process. This wasn't just a military loss. It was a political humiliation that sent shockwaves through the empire, exposing vulnerabilities that had been hidden beneath layers of ceremonial pomp and strategic maneuvering. So, what about those Byzantine bureaucrats, the guys who turned the wheels of this vast empire with a level of complexity that would give a modern-day civil servant pause? The Byzantine bureaucracy was nothing short of legendary, a sprawling maze of offices and officials that made sure the empire continued to function, even when the emperor was off on a military campaign or locked in a gilded cage of court intrigue. This bureaucracy was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided the stability and continuity that allowed the empire to endure for centuries. On the other, it was a breeding ground for corruption and inefficiency. Tax collectors were notorious for lining their own pockets, and the convoluted administration often left the rural peasantry feeling more like ATM machines than valued citizens. The Byzantines were experts at creating a system that kept the empire running, but it was a delicate balance, constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. And yet, despite these challenges, the Byzantine Empire managed to project an image of power and prestige that captivated the imagination of its Eastern European neighbors. In truth, Byzantium was less of an unstoppable juggernaut and more of a resilient survivor, adept at adapting to the ever-changing political landscape. Empire's influence spread across Eastern Europe like a wine stain on a white tablecloth, pervasive and impossible to ignore. So, what's the real story behind Byzantium's perceived invincibility? It was a mix of savvy diplomacy, military innovation, and the kind of bureaucratic wizardry that could make even the most convoluted tax code look like child's play. The Byzantines weren't superhuman. They were just particularly good at playing the hand they were dealt. And while their empire eventually crumbled, their legacy of political and military strategy lived on, shaping the history of Eastern Europe for generations. The empire's eventual decline wasn't a sudden implosion, but a slow unraveling, like a favorite sweater worn one too many winters. By the time the Fourth Crusade came knocking in 1204, the Byzantines were a shadow of their former glory, their empire carved up by greedy Western European knights who saw an opportunity and seized it with both hands. It was a brutal reminder that even the mightiest empires are not immune to the tides of history. But here's the kicker. Despite its decline, the Byzantine Empire left an indelible mark on Eastern Europe. Its blend of diplomacy, military strategy, and bureaucratic governance served as a blueprint for emerging states, offering lessons in both what to emulate and what to avoid. The Byzantines weren't just relics of the past. They were architects of the future, their influence echoing through the ages in ways both subtle and profound. So, as we wrap up this chapter in the Byzantine saga, let's remember that history isn't just about what was, it's about what could be. The Byzantine Empire may have fallen, but its story continues to unfold in the lands and cultures it touched. And as we move forward, we'll see how the lessons of Byzantium reverberate through the corridors of power, leaving a legacy that is as complex and captivating as the empire itself. Stay tuned, because the Byzantine tale is far from over, and there are still plenty of twists and turns to explore. So, while the Byzantine Empire's curtain call in 1453 might suggest an abrupt end to its saga, the truth is far more nuanced. The empire's influence didn't just vanish into the ether like a magician's disappearing act. Instead, it left a rich tapestry of cultural, legal, and artistic legacies that continue to weave through the Eastern European landscape, proving that history's echoes can be as resonant as its loudest trumpets. First, let's talk language. Byzantium's linguistic legacy is like that catchy pop song you can't get out of your head. Greek was the empire's lingua franca, and it stuck around Eastern Europe like a particularly persistent house guest. It became the foundation for the liturgical languages of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which means that even today, if you're attending a service in Moscow or Belgrade, you're hearing echoes of Byzantine catechisms. The Cyrillic alphabet, crafted by those savvy missionaries, Cyril and Methodius in the 9th century, became the written backbone of many Slavic languages. It's like the gift that keeps on giving, ensuring that Byzantine influence remains woven into the very letters used across Eastern Europe. Sure, Google Translate might not recognize the cultural heft behind every word, but trust me, it's there. Now, onto art, because who doesn't love a good mosaic? Byzantine art was as much about storytelling as it was about aesthetics. Those shimmering mosaics and vibrant icons were the medieval equivalent of a blockbuster movie, packed with religious symbolism and designed to dazzle. The art style, characterized by its use of gold leaf and iconic depictions of religious figures, spread far and wide. It became the blueprint for Orthodox Christian art, casting its golden glow over Russia, Serbia, and Bulgaria. Even after the Ottomans turned Hagia Sophia into a mosque, the Byzantine artistic flair persisted, influencing Islamic art with its geometric patterns and elaborate arabesques. Talk about leaving a mark. But here's where it gets even more fascinating: Byzantine law. You might think legal codes are as dry as an overcooked turkey, but the Byzantines had a knack for turning jurisprudence into an art form. The Corpus Juris Civilis, or Justinian Code, compiled under Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century, was a legal tour de force. It wasn't just a collection of laws. It was a comprehensive legal framework that influenced legal systems well beyond Byzantium's borders. This code laid the groundwork for the civil law traditions that would later take root in many parts of Europe. In Eastern Europe, these principles served as a judicial compass, guiding the development of legal systems in places like Bulgaria and Serbia. It was like the original law and order without the gavel-banging drama. But let's not sugarcoat it. The Byzantine legacy wasn't all glitter and gold leaf. The empire's bureaucratic and legal systems, while advanced, were also labyrinthine and often mired in corruption. Taxation and governance could be as unpredictable as a toddler with a crayon, leading to social tensions and, at times, outright rebellion. The Byzantine influence, therefore, was a mixed bag, equal parts brilliance and bureaucracy. And let's debunk the myth of Byzantium as a purely spiritual and artistic beacon. Sure, it was a center of religious devotion and cultural production, but it was also a political heavyweight. The Byzantines were masters of realpolitik, their influence shaping the power dynamics of Eastern Europe long after the empire's fall. Their political machinations, diplomatic marriages, and strategic alliances were the stuff of legend, making the Byzantine legacy as much about power as it was about piety. So, what does this all mean for Eastern Europe? Byzantium wasn't just an empire that left behind a trail of impressive architecture and religious fervor. It was a cultural and legal powerhouse. Its traditions, both sacred and secular, became the threads of Eastern European identity, woven into the fabric of nations like Russia, Greece, and Serbia. Even as the Ottoman Empire swept in and changed the political landscape, Byzantine traditions persisted, like a historical undercurrent that refused to be swept away. In many ways, the Byzantine Empire served as a bridge between the ancient and modern worlds, a link that connected the classical traditions of Rome and Greece with the evolving cultures of Eastern Europe. Its influence was like a historical relay baton, passed down through generations, shaping language, art, and lore in ways that still resonate today. It's a reminder that empires may fall, but their legacies often transcend their borders and their lifespans. As we wrap up this Byzantine journey, remember that history is rarely a simple tale of rise and fall. It's a story of transformation, adaptation, and enduring influence. The Byzantine Empire may have been reduced to memory and ruins, but its impact remains as vibrant as its mosaics, as enduring as its laws. So next time you're admiring an Orthodox church or pondering the roots of a Cyrillic script, tip your hat to Byzantium. It's the empire that keeps on giving, its echoes lingering in the halls of history, louder than ever. And with that, dear listeners, we conclude our Byzantine saga, a journey through an empire that refused to be forgotten, proving once again that history's greatest legacies are those that stand the test of time. In the world of ancient game changers, the Phoenicians were the people who turned the Mediterranean into their own personal conveyor belt of commerce. If you think of them as the original gig economy workers, zipping around the sea with the hustle of 1,000 Uber drivers, you'd be spot on. These folks weren't just dipping their toes in the water. They were cannonballing into the waves with a maritime prowess that left others in their wake. Founded around 1500 BCE, their city-states like Tyre and Sidon were the buzzing hub of activity, perfectly positioned on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, where modern-day Lebanon lounges by the sea. Now, you might be thinking, why all the fuss about geography? Well, in those days, the right real estate could make or break your civilization, and the Phoenicians had front-row seats to the Mediterranean show. With mountains at their backs and the sea stretching out in front of them, they had a natural fortress that doubled as a launch pad for their maritime adventures. Unlike their neighbors who were more landlocked and busy building massive ziggurats or pyramids, the Phoenicians poured their energy into becoming the nautical ninjas of the ancient world. Their coastal location wasn't just a geographic convenience, it was an economic powerhouse. The Mediterranean Sea was the Silk Road of the ancient world, only wetter and with more waves. The Phoenicians figured out that if they could master the sea, they could control trade routes, which meant wealth. And not just any wealth, but the kind that transformed their city-states into thriving metropolises. With the Mediterranean as their playground, the Phoenicians were like the cool kids who didn't just attend the party. They hosted it. They crafted ships that were the envy of the ancient world, sleek vessels that cut through water like butter on a hot day. These ships weren't just for show. They were the backbone of a trading network that stretched from the Levant to the far corners of the known world, reaching as far as modern-day Spain and beyond. But before we get too starry-eyed about these maritime maestros, let's not forget the harsh realities. Sailing the Mediterranean wasn't all sun and sea breezes. It was a perilous endeavor, with unpredictable weather, pirates lurking around every rocky outcrop, and the constant threat of shipwreck. Yet the Phoenicians pressed on, driven by the allure of trade goods and profit margins that would make any modern entrepreneur drool. They navigated the seas with the help of the North Star, a trusty companion that guided them through the night like a cosmic GPS. The Phoenicians weren't just traders, they were cultural diplomats. They spread ideas, technology, and goods across the sea lanes, acting as the conduits of ancient innovation. They were the original marketers, selling not just products, but also the allure of their culture. The purple dye from Tyre, extracted from the murex snail, became the fashion statement of the elite across the ancient world. Forget about today's designer labels. Back then, a robe dyed in Tyrian purple was the ultimate status symbol. It was so exclusive that it could cost as much as a small fortune, and it's said that only the wealthiest could afford to be draped in its royal hue. Now, let's talk city-states. Tyre and Sidon were the twin engines driving the Phoenician juggernaut. Tyre, with its island fortress and formidable harbors, was the Manhattan of its day, a bustling hub of trade and innovation. Sidon, not to be outdone, was renowned for its skilled craftsmen and shipbuilders. These cities were fiercely independent, but bound together by a shared culture and love for the sea. They operated like a loose confederation, each city with its own king and political machinations, but united by the common goal of making a killing in the trade game. Phoenician society was a melting pot of influences, a veritable cocktail of cultures, shaken and stirred by the constant flow of goods and ideas. They were savvy negotiators, adept at playing different powers against each other to maintain their independence. The Egyptians, Assyrians, and later the Greeks and Romans all had to reckon with the Phoenician knack for diplomacy and trade. They were like the Switzerland of antiquity, neutral when it suited them, but always ready to make a deal. The Phoenicians' knack for sailing wasn't just about moving goods, it was about connecting civilizations. They were the internet of the ancient world, facilitating the exchange of ideas, art, and technology. Their influence can be seen in the spread of the alphabet, which they developed, and which laid the groundwork for the scripts used by the Greeks, and eventually the Romans. This wasn't just a list of characters. It was a linguistic revolution that transformed the way people communicated across cultures. But let's not get too romantic. The Phoenicians were also pragmatists, adept at reading the winds of change and adjusting their sails accordingly. Their trade empire wasn't built on idealism. It was built on the hard-nosed realities of supply and demand, profit and loss. They knew how to strike a bargain and weren't afraid to drive a hard one. Their influence, while vast, was always tethered to the reality that they were at the mercy of the sea and the whims of the powerful empires that surrounded them. In the grand tapestry of history, the Phoenicians were the threads that connected disparate cultures, weaving together a rich tapestry of commerce and innovation. They were the unsung heroes of the ancient world, navigating the treacherous waters of politics and trade with a skill that would make even the most seasoned modern diplomat take notes. So next time you hear the term Phoenician, think of them not as a footnote in history, but as the audacious adventurers who turned the Mediterranean into their private highway, and in doing so, changed the course of history. The Phoenicians were like the ancient world's best-kept secret, but were about to spill the alphabet-shaped beans. Around 1050 BCE, these maritime maestros did something that would make even the most stoic historian raise an eyebrow. They invented an alphabet. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another dusty artifact, let's put this in perspective. We're talking about an invention that would eventually outshine the pyramids not in height, but in impact. This wasn't just a list of squiggles. It was a game-changer for communication, a revolution that made the Rosetta Stone look like a paperweight. Picture the ancient world like a bustling marketplace. You've got merchants yelling in different dialects, trying to out-haggle one another. Writing, up until this point, was mostly the playground of elite scribes dabbling in complex cuneiform or hieroglyphics. It was like the exclusive club of the literate, entry by royal invitation only. But the Phoenicians, they were the disruptors who decided everyone should have a backstage pass. They streamlined writing from cumbersome symbols to a sleek 22-character system, making literacy accessible to the common folk. This wasn't just a linguistic makeover, it was a communicative revolution, sort of like switching from dial-up to fiber optic in the ancient world. Why was this such a big deal, you ask? Let's break it down economically. In a world where trade was king, the Phoenician alphabet was like the universal translator. It allowed for more efficient record-keeping, quicker exchange of information, and fewer misunderstandings in trade deals. Imagine trying to negotiate the price of Tyrian purple with a buyer in the marketplace, only to find out later you agreed to sell your entire cargo for a handful of figs because you couldn't decode hieroglyphics. Yeah, awkward. The alphabet eliminated such faux pas and made business transactions smoother than a Phoenician galley slicing through the Mediterranean waves. Now, let's toss a little myth-busting into the mix. The Phoenicians didn't create this alphabet from scratch. They were more like brilliant editors. They took existing writing systems, gave them a nip and tuck, and voila, a streamlined alphabet that anyone could learn. It was less about inventing and more about refining. The romantic narrative might have you believe that some ancient Phoenician woke up one morning with an alphabet epiphany, but in reality, it was a gradual evolution driven by necessity and ingenuity. Political impact of the alphabet was just as significant. It allowed for the spread of ideas and governance structures more efficiently than ever before. This wasn't just about keeping track of who owed whom a bushel of grain. It was about spreading laws, religious texts, and cultural narratives across the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians turned the sea lanes into information highways, and their alphabet was the fast lane. Here's another zinger. While the alphabet was a democratizing force, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. The very thing that made it revolutionary, its simplicity, also made it easy to adapt, and in some cases steal. The Greeks, ever the opportunists, took a shine to the Phoenician system and added their own vowels, creating a script that would eventually lead to the Latin alphabet. So, the next time you jot down a grocery list or text a friend, give a nod to the Phoenicians, who were the unsung influencers of the ancient world. As with any good story, there's a twist. The Phoenicians didn't leave us a Rosetta Stone equivalent to explain their thought process. What we know about their alphabet comes piecemeal, like a jigsaw puzzle with a few pieces missing. Yet, its impact is undeniable, spreading across cultures faster than you can say, trending. And let's not forget the economic context. The simplicity of the Phoenician alphabet meant it required less training to master, which translated to lower costs in education and transcription. This was a boon for merchants whose ledgers grew thicker than Egyptian papyrus scrolls. In a world where time was money, literally, since trade was often based on barter and timely exchanges, efficiency was currency. The spread of this alphabet wasn't just a Phoenician venture. It was adopted and adapted by various cultures around the Mediterranean, each adding their own flair. This cultural cross-pollination is a testament to the Phoenicians' knack for diplomacy and trade. They were like the ancient world's version of open-source software developers, providing a tool that others could modify and improve upon, leading to the scripts that would eventually shape Western civilization. In the grand scheme of history, the Phoenician alphabet was a precursor to the digital communication revolutions we see today. It was the first domino in a chain reaction that would ultimately lead to the written word being accessible to all, from scholars in Athens to merchants in Carthage. The Phoenicians may not have built towering wonders of the world, but they laid the groundwork for something arguably more lasting: the ability for civilizations to communicate, record, and innovate with unprecedented ease. So, next time you find yourself scrolling through an endless feed of content, remember the Phoenicians. Their alphabet was the original viral sensation, spreading not through hashtags, but through the hands of traders, scribes, and scholars who recognized its potential to connect worlds. They may have been the quiet architects of written communication, but their legacy is as loud as a ship's horn cutting through the Mediterranean mist. And just like that, we find ourselves at the cusp of another chapter in the Phoenician saga, with more to unravel about these nautical pioneers and their enduring influence on the world stage. And just like that, we find ourselves diving deeper into the Phoenician saga, ready to unravel the mysteries of their trade networks. Picture the ancient Mediterranean, but forget the sun-drenched beaches, and think more about the bustling docks and roaring markets. The Phoenicians were the original deal-makers, conducting business with the kind of savvy that would put modern moguls to shame. They didn't need Twitter or LinkedIn. They had the Mediterranean Sea as their LinkedIn profile and their ships as their tweets. Let's start with the goods. The Phoenicians weren't just peddling your run-of-the-mill spices and grains. They were the purveyors of luxury. First up, the infamous Tyrian purple dye. This wasn't just any dye. It was the ancient equivalent of haute couture, painstakingly extracted from the murex snail. And here's where things get both fascinating and a tad gruesome. It took about 10,000 snails to produce a single ounce of dye. Talk about labor-intensive. Imagine the modern-day equivalent of making a designer dress that requires the effort of an entire ecosystem. No wonder it was a hit among the upper echelons, with prices that could rival today's most extravagant fashion items. But before we get too carried away with visions of purple-draped aristocrats, let's dive into another Phoenician treasure, the cedar of Lebanon. These trees were the skyscrapers of the ancient forest, reaching up to 130 feet in height and prized for their durability and aroma. The Egyptians couldn't get enough of them, using the wood to build everything from furniture to their iconic ships. The Phoenicians were the middlemen, cutting deals that would see these majestic timbers floated down the Mediterranean like logs on a lazy river. The cedar trade was a timber-filled gold mine, and the Phoenicians cashed in big time. But wait, it wasn't just about dye and timber. The Phoenicians were also trading metals like silver and tin, materials that were the lifeblood of the Bronze Age economy. They sourced tin from as far away as the British Isles, a journey that makes today's long-haul flights look like a leisurely stroll. And let's not forget glass. The Phoenicians were innovators, credited with some of the earliest glass-making techniques. Imagine the appeal of colored glass trinkets and vessels in a world starved for shiny, decorative items. They were essentially the Tiffany and Co. of antiquity. So, how did they manage all this without modern technology? They had something arguably better, an intricate knowledge of the sea and a network of trading posts that would make any logistics manager green with envy. Picture a series of city-state franchises, each strategically located along the key maritime routes. From Cyprus to Carthage, the Phoenicians set up shop, creating a chain of influence that spanned continents. Their ships were the backbone of this operation, sleek and fast, capable of carrying substantial cargo with a crew that knew the waves like the back of their hands. These vessels were the ancient equivalent of a well-oiled freight operation, consistently delivering goods across vast distances. And here's a little-known nugget. The Phoenicians even planted colonies as far away as what is now modern-day Spain, a testament to their maritime ambition and reach. Now, while all this sounds like a smooth-sailing success story, reality had its rough edges. The Mediterranean was a pirate's playground, and the Phoenicians had to be constantly on guard against these seafaring bandits. Add to that the fickle nature of ancient politics, alliances that could shift as quickly as the wind, and you have a recipe for a precarious existence. Yet, through a combination of shrewd diplomacy and sheer tenacity, the Phoenicians managed not just to survive, but thrive. And let's not ignore the economic undercurrents. The Phoenician trade network wasn't just about swapping goods. It was about creating a commercial empire. They understood the power of trade to influence politics and culture. By controlling the supply of luxury items, they were able to play the role of kingmakers, influencing the politics of powerful neighbors like Egypt and Assyria. But here's where the romantic narrative and the harsh reality meet. While it's tempting to view the Phoenicians as benevolent trade wizards, they were also pragmatists. Their trade empire was built on the backs of countless workers, from the sailors who braved the seas to the laborers who extracted the dye and cut the timber. The economic engine that powered their civilization was fueled by hard work and, no doubt, a fair share of exploitation. So, the next time you marvel at a modern marketplace or the intricate web of global trade, remember the Phoenicians. They were the trailblazers who turned the Mediterranean into a commercial highway, laying the groundwork for the trading empires that would follow. Their legacy is a reminder of the power of commerce to connect and transform societies, a lesson as relevant today as it was over 3,000 years ago. And with that, our journey through the trade networks of the Phoenicians continues to unfold, with more twists and turns waiting to be explored. Stay tuned as we dive even deeper into the world of these ancient mariners, the entrepreneurs of their age, who left an indelible mark on the annals of history. And so, as the curtain rises on the next act of our Phoenician saga, we find ourselves steering away from the bustling trade routes and setting a course for the mysterious, often misunderstood world of Phoenician culture and religion. Buckle up, because we're diving into a realm where myths run wild. Reality often takes a backseat, and the Greeks play the role of ancient gossip columnists. First up, let's tackle the Phoenician pantheon, a motley crew of deities that would make even the most seasoned mythologist do a double-take. At the helm was Baal, a name that rings through ancient texts with the kind of notoriety usually reserved for rock stars or tabloid magnates. Baal was the god of storms and fertility, not exactly a combo you'd expect, but hey, ancient deities had to multitask. His worship wasn't just about shaking tambourines and chanting. It was a serious business that involved elaborate rituals and offerings. And then there's Astarte, the goddess of love and war. Yes, you heard that right. She was the original dual threat, a celestial figure who could inspire both passion and panic. Astarte was often depicted with symbols of both fertility and combat, proving that in the ancient world, love and war weren't just bedfellows. They were practically conjoined twins. Now, before we get too swept away by these divine soap operas, let's pop the bubble of myth with a reality check. The Greeks, ever the creative interpreters, painted the Phoenicians as a mysterious, almost villainous people with strange, exotic rituals. In reality, the Phoenician religious practices were not all that different from their contemporaries in the ancient Near East. Sacrifices. Check. Temples adorned with costly offerings. Check. Priestly hierarchies and societal influence. Double check. But the Greeks, masters of spin, knew that a little exaggeration could turn a rival into a legend. Here's a fun fact for your next trivia night. The Greeks loved a good story about child sacrifice, and they often pinned this gruesome practice on the Phoenicians, particularly in the city of Carthage. But modern archaeology has thrown a wet blanket on this fiery myth. Evidence suggests that these tales were more about smear campaigns than reality. It's like blaming all your high school woes on the rival team just because they always beat you at football. You see, the Greeks were the ancient world's PR maestros, and they knew that a sensational story could travel faster than a Phoenician ship. By casting their rivals as the other, they reinforced their own cultural superiority, because nothing unites people like a common enemy, real or imagined. The Greeks turned the Phoenicians into the ancient equivalent of a tabloid headline. Mysterious seafarers worship strange gods. What are they hiding? The truth is, the Phoenicians were as pragmatic in religion as they were in trade. Their gods were reflective of their environment and needs. Baal's storms weren't just a metaphor. They were a daily reality for seafarers who depended on favorable winds to guide their ships. Astarte's dual nature mirrored the complexities of life, the joys of love tempered by the inevitabilities of conflict. Let's not forget the economic angle here. Religion was big business in Phoenician society, much like it was across the ancient world. Temples weren't just spiritual centers, they were economic powerhouses. They controlled vast tracts of land, collected offerings that would make a tax collector envious, and even acted as banks. The priests were the financial wizards of their day, managing these temple economies with the precision of a modern-day CFO. But what about the artistic flair of these ancient city-states? Well, the Phoenicians were no slouches in the cultural department. Their art and architecture, although not as well documented as that of the Greeks or Egyptians, reflected a blend of influences that spoke to their role as middlemen of the Mediterranean. They borrowed, adapted, and innovated, creating works that were as eclectic as a Phoenician marketplace. Take their metalwork, for example. Phoenician artisans were renowned for their skill, producing intricate jewelry and statuary that blended Egyptian motifs with local styles. These pieces were not just decorative, they were status symbols, coveted by elites across the Mediterranean. It's like combining the chic of Parisian fashion with the boldness of New York design, a cultural fusion that left a lasting imprint. And let's not overlook the written word. While we've already sung the praises of their alphabet, it's worth noting that their religious texts and myths, albeit fragmented, offer tantalizing glimpses into their world. These stories weren't just bedtime tales, they were teaching tools, conveying moral lessons and cultural values. They were as much about identity as they were about entertainment. But hold on. Before you start picturing the Phoenicians as ancient hipsters, let's revisit the gritty reality. Despite their cultural achievements, the Phoenicians were caught in a perpetual balancing act, navigating the political and military ambitions of their more powerful neighbors. Their city-states were often pawns in the grand chess game of empires, and their autonomy was a constant juggling act of diplomacy and tribute. Yet, through it all, the Phoenicians maintained their cultural identity, a testament to their resilience and adaptability. They were like the ultimate survivors of history, able to weather the storms of change while leaving an indelible mark on the world. Their cultural legacy, much like their trade empire, was built on the foundation of innovation, adaptability, and a little bit of ancient marketing magic. As we wrap up this segment of our Phoenician Odyssey, keep in mind that there's more to come. We've only scratched the surface of their cultural and religious tapestry, and the deeper we dig, the more layers we uncover. Stay tuned, because the next leg of our journey promises to be as enlightening as it is intriguing, with more myths to debunk, legends to explore, and realities to confront. Now, as we pivot into the final act of the Phoenician saga, let's talk legacy. Because really, what's the point of all those centuries of hustle if future generations don't remember you? The Phoenicians may not have left behind towering monuments or sprawling empires that scream, "Look at me," from the pages of history books, but their legacy is as subtle as it is profound. They're the quiet influencers whose impact echoes in the very fabric of Western civilization, like the low hum of a well-tuned engine. First off, Let's address their influence on the Greeks and Romans. These were civilizations that knew a good thing when they saw it, and they weren't shy about borrowing from the Phoenicians. Take navigation, for example. While the Greeks were busy mythologizing the sea with tales of sirens and sea monsters, the Phoenicians were busy perfecting the art of getting from point A to point B without becoming fish food. Their mastery of the Mediterranean's tricky waters set the standard for maritime navigation. The Romans, who would later rule the waves, were indebted to the Phoenician knack for understanding the sea's moods as intimately as a sailor knows the constellations. Speaking of constellations, the Phoenicians were practically the ancient world's Galileo. They were among the first to use the North Star for navigation, something so simple yet revolutionary that it's like inventing the wheel of the sea. This celestial GPS allowed them to venture further than others dared, setting the stage for Greek explorers and Roman conquerors who would follow in their wake. The Greeks might have immortalized their heroes in epic poems, but it was the Phoenicians who gave them the tools to actually get out there and make those myths a reality. And then there's the alphabet, the Phoenician gift that keeps on giving. The Phoenicians didn't just invent an alphabet. They sparked a literacy revolution. The Greeks took up this Phoenician marvel like it was the latest tech gadget, adding vowels and creating a script that was as smooth as a Mediterranean breeze. This was the foundation for the Latin alphabet, the very one you're reading right now. It's like the Phoenicians handed the Greeks a sleek, user-friendly smartphone, and the Greeks responded by saying, "Sure, but we'll add a few apps." The economic implications of this alphabet were no less groundbreaking. By simplifying writing, the Phoenicians turned literacy from a luxury into something closer to a commodity. This democratization of writing meant that trade, business, and diplomacy could flourish like never before. Record-keeping became as essential as the sea itself, allowing for more complex and widespread trade networks. It's safe to say that without this alphabetic leap, the wheels of commerce might have turned a little slower, and history's pages would be a lot harder to read. But let's not get too starry-eyed about the Phoenicians as benevolent cultural benefactors. Their legacy wasn't just about spreading knowledge. It was about securing their place in a competitive ancient world. They played a game of survival and influence, knowing full well that their city-states were dwarfed by larger empires. By exporting their culture, technology, and trade practices, they were also exporting their influence. It's a bit like being the underdog, who knows they can't win the heavyweight title, but can certainly shape the rules of the game. Their influence wasn't confined to the Mediterranean, either. The Phoenician colony of Carthage, founded in the 9th century BCE, became a powerhouse in its own right, challenging Rome for control of the western Mediterranean. The Punic Wars, those epic clashes between Rome and Carthage, were essentially a legacy of Phoenician expansion. Carthage was the Phoenician spirit writ large, a testament to their enduring impact on world history. And while Carthage eventually fell, the echoes of its struggle with Rome reverberate through the annals of history, a stark reminder of the Phoenician ability to punch above their weight. In the broader tapestry of history, the Phoenicians were the threads that connected cultures and civilizations, weaving a complex fabric of commerce, language, and innovation. They were the subtle architects of change, shaping the world not with the blunt force of empire, but with the precision of a master craftsman. Their legacy is the quiet whisper of influence, a testament to the idea that you don't need to be the biggest or the loudest to make a lasting impact. So, as we draw the curtain on the Phoenician saga, let's give credit where credit is due. They were the unsung heroes of the ancient world, whose contributions continue to ripple through time. Whether it's the alphabet we use, the trade networks we rely on, or the navigation techniques that guide us, the Phoenicians are there, a silent but steadfast presence in the story of civilization. They may not have built grand monuments, but their legacy is etched in the everyday, a reminder that sometimes the most profound influences are the ones that operate just beneath the surface. And with that, we bid farewell to the Phoenicians, the ultimate testament to the power of innovation, adaptability, and quiet resilience in the grand sweep of history. Emperor Akbar. Now there's a name that stirs up images of grand palaces, sweeping conquests, and maybe the occasional elephant parade. But before we dive into his reign, let's rewind a bit to his teenage years. While most of us were busy navigating acne and algebra, Akbar was busy navigating, empires. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Instead, he was born with the weighty expectation of an entire dynasty on his tiny shoulders. Born in 1542, Akbar was the grandson of Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire. Talk about family pressure. His father, Humayun, was a bit like that uncle who can't seem to keep a steady job. Humayun spent much of his reign either on the run or trying to reclaim his throne. Akbar, on the other hand, was a prodigy of power dynamics. At the ripe age of 13, when most of us were stumbling through awkward school dances, Akbar was declared emperor. He officially took the throne in 1556, although it was really his regent, Behram Khan, who was pulling the strings initially. But don't let that fool you. Akbar had a knack for learning on the job. In a world where political intrigue made Game of Thrones look like a Disney movie, Akbar quickly learned that survival required more than just a good sword arm. He inherited an empire that was more patchwork quilt than cohesive kingdom. The Mughal Empire was surrounded by rivals who would happily see it unravel. It was like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. But Akbar had something up his sleeve, a novel approach to leadership. You see, Akbar was no ordinary ruler. He understood that brute force wasn't the only way to hold an empire together. Instead, he opted for a more inclusive approach, one that might seem anachronistic, given the era. He encouraged religious tolerance, which wasn't exactly the norm in a time when rulers often used religion like a club to bludgeon opponents. He even went so far as to marry a Rajput princess, which was more than just a romantic gesture. It was a political masterstroke. This union helped secure alliances with the powerful Rajput clans, incorporating them into the Mughal fold rather than leaving them as adversaries on the fringes. His court became a melting pot of ideas and perspectives. Akbar was all about dialogue and debate, inviting scholars, poets, and thinkers from across the religious spectrum to engage in discussions at his court. This wasn't just a PR stunt. It was a genuine attempt to understand and incorporate different viewpoints into his administration. Akbar's rule was like the Renaissance fair of the Mughal era, filled with lively debates, cultural exchanges, and occasionally a bit of theatrical flair. Now, let's not romanticize things too much. Akbar was still a ruler in a time when power was often measured by the size of your army and the fear you could instill in your enemies. He was a military genius, leading campaigns that expanded the Mughal Empire significantly. By the end of his reign, his empire stretched over 5 million square kilometers, an impressive feat considering he started with just a handful of territories and a dream. He was also shrewd enough to know when to pick his battles. The Second Battle of Panipat in 1556 was a pivotal moment. Akbar's forces, led by Behram Khan, faced off against Hemu, a formidable opponent who had declared himself ruler of North India. This was no small skirmish. Hemu had already conquered Delhi and was poised to take over the region. But a well-timed arrow took Hemu out of commission, turning the tide in favor of the Mughals. Akbar's victory at Panipat wasn't just a military triumph. It solidified his claim to the throne and set the stage for his eventual dominance. And yet, for all his military acumen, Akbar knew that true power lay in stability and prosperity. He understood the importance of a robust economy, implementing reforms that streamlined tax collection and reduced the burden on his subjects. He introduced the Mansabdari system, a kind of proto-bureaucracy that organized his empire's administration and military. This wasn't just about keeping the wheels of government turning smoothly. It was about ensuring that the empire's coffers remained full and its people relatively content. In a time when dynastic squabbles often led to messy, bloody coups, Akbar's ability to maintain control was nothing short of remarkable. His court was rife with intrigue, but he navigated it with the same skill he applied on the battlefield. He was a chess master, always thinking several moves ahead, and making sure that no one could easily topple his king. So, the next time you find yourself stressing over the trials of adolescence, spare a thought for young Akbar, who managed to juggle the complexities of empire building while barely out of his teens. His early years were a whirlwind of battles, betrayals, and bold strategies, a prelude to a reign that would be remembered not only for its military successes, but for its visionary leadership. As we delve further into his life, we'll see how Akbar continued to defy the norms of his time, shaping an empire that was as diverse and dynamic as the man himself. Akbar's reign wasn't just about military conquests and diplomatic marriages. It was about flipping the script on how empires were run. Picture this: a ruler in the 16th century, India, deciding to abolish the jizya tax, a levy imposed on non-Muslims. This was like Netflix dropping an unexpected series that nobody saw coming, but with much more significant social ramifications. The jizya had been around for centuries, a financial reminder of religious hierarchy. Abolishing it, that was revolutionary, and not everyone was thrilled about it. Some of Akbar's advisors probably thought he'd lost his marbles, but Akbar was playing a different game altogether. He understood that unity wasn't just a matter of military might. It was about winning hearts and minds. And if that meant shaking up centuries-old traditions, so be it. Let's break down why this move was so groundbreaking. The jizya, while a significant source of income, was also a symbol of division. By scrapping it, Akbar wasn't just making a fiscal decision. He was sending a message that the Mughal Empire was a place where diversity was strength, not a weakness to be taxed. It was a bold move, akin to a CEO deciding to ditch a profitable yet divisive product line for the sake of company culture. Sure, there were grumblings, but Akbar wasn't about to let a little dissent get in the way of his vision. Speaking of visions, Akbar's administration was a marvel of innovation. Enter the Mansabdari system, a bureaucratic wonder that organized the empire into a well-oiled machine. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of corporate hierarchies, with positions ranked like a modern-day LinkedIn profile. The Mansabdars, or officials, were assigned ranks, each responsible for maintaining a certain number of troops, which they paid for out of their official salaries. This wasn't just about keeping the military in check. It was about ensuring loyalty by tying their fortunes to the empire's success. It was a clever way to avoid the classic pitfall of ambitious underlings plotting coups. After all, why bite the hand that feeds not just you, but your entire battalion? The Mansabdari system also meant that Akbar's empire ran like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Each official knew their part, and while there were occasional soloists, the overall symphony was one of harmony and efficiency. This setup allowed Akbar to focus on the bigger picture, expanding his empire, fostering cultural exchanges, and yes, sometimes engaging in a bit of philosophical musing. He was like the Steve Jobs of his day, constantly innovating and challenging the status quo, but with fewer turtlenecks and more elephants. But let's not get carried away with the romanticism of it all. Akbar's governance wasn't without its challenges. Managing such a vast empire required constant vigilance, and there were always those who questioned his decisions. The abolition of the jizya, for instance, didn't sit well with everyone. Some traditionalists saw it as a betrayal, an erosion of Islamic dominance, but Akbar had an uncanny ability to navigate these tensions, using his charisma and political savvy to smooth over potential crises. He was a master of compromise, knowing when to stand firm and when to bend a little. Economically, Akbar's reforms were a double-edged sword. While they fostered unity and loyalty, they also strained the empire's finances. Abolishing the jizya meant finding other revenue streams, and Akbar wasn't one to simply print more currency. Instead, he focused on improving agricultural productivity and trade, turning the empire's vast lands into a source of wealth. He introduced standardized weights and measures, ensuring that markets across the empire operated under a unified system. This wasn't just about boosting the economy. It was about creating a sense of shared identity and purpose. Trade flourished under Akbar's rule, with the empire becoming a hub of commerce. The Grand Trunk Road, a marvel of ancient engineering, connected distant lands, facilitating the flow of goods and ideas. Akbar's ports buzzed with activity, as traders from as far as Europe and Southeast Asia exchanged their wares. This wasn't just about economic growth, it was about cultural exchange on a grand scale. Akbar's empire was a vibrant mosaic of languages, religions, and cultures, each contributing to the rich tapestry that was the Mughal dynasty. And yet, amidst all this progress, Akbar never lost sight of the human element. He was known for his accessibility, often meeting with subjects from all walks of life to hear their grievances and suggestions. It was a hands-on approach that endeared him to many, reinforcing his image as a ruler who genuinely cared about his people. This wasn't just benevolence, it was a strategic move to ensure loyalty and stability. After all, an empire is only as strong as the support it receives from its subjects. In the grand scheme of things, Akbar's reign was a delicate balancing act. He was juggling economic reforms, religious tolerance, military campaigns, and administrative innovations, all while keeping an eye on potential threats from within and outside the empire. It was a high-wire act that required skill, foresight, and a touch of showmanship. Akbar wasn't just a ruler, he was an impresario, orchestrating a grand performance that captivated the world stage. So there you have it, a glimpse into Akbar's innovative governance, a blend of bold decisions, strategic planning, and a dash of charisma. As we delve deeper into his reign, we'll continue to uncover the layers of complexity that defined this remarkable emperor. Stay tuned, because the story of Akbar is far from over, and there's plenty more to explore in the chapters ahead. Now, if you thought Akbar's administrative innovations were impressive, wait until you hear about his religious policies. Picture a 16th century emperor deciding that the best way to unite his diverse empire is to blend various religious practices into a single spiritual concoction. Enter Din-i-Ilahi, Akbar's attempt at creating a sort of theological smoothie. It was as if he took the coexist bumper sticker concept, added a dash of imperial ambition, and stirred it with a royal scepter. Akbar was a man ahead of his time, and his Din-i-Ilahi was an ambitious experiment in interfaith dialogue. Born from his fascination with religious harmony, it was an eclectic mix, drawing from Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Jainism, and Zoroastrianism, among others. Imagine a dinner party where Buddha, Jesus, and Zoroaster are all given equal billing. Akbar's court was essentially that, without the awkward dinner seating arrangements. Now, before we get too carried away, let's bust some myths. Din-i-Ilahi was never intended to be a full-fledged religion. It was more of a philosophical club, with Akbar as its charismatic chairman. Membership was exclusive, with only about 19 known members, including some of his closest advisors and courtiers. It's like Akbar started the world's most exclusive book club, but instead of discussing novels, they pondered the meaning of life over chai. Despite its limited reach, Din-i-Ilahi was significant for what it represented, an emperor who dared to challenge the status quo in a deeply divided world. Yet, some folks saw it as Akbar's ploy to position himself as a divine figure, a claim that's more smoke than fire. Sure, he was revered by his followers, but let's not jump to conclusions that he was angling for a spot in the pantheon. In reality, Akbar was more about fostering unity than indulging in divine aspirations. Now, let's talk numbers, because what's history without some data to back it up? By the late 1580, Akbar's religious policies had already started to reshape the Mughal Empire's social fabric. The abolition of the jizya tax had cost the empire a sizable chunk of revenue, but it also helped reduce religious tensions, paving the way for economic growth and social cohesion. It's like Akbar was playing a long game of chess, sacrificing short-term gain for enduring stability. Economically, Akbar's inclusive policies paid dividends. The empire's GDP saw a noticeable uptick, thanks in part to increased trade and agricultural productivity. By the end of his reign, the Mughal economy was among the most robust in the world, a testament to his visionary leadership. The Grand Trunk Road, that ancient artery of commerce, was a testament to this economic vitality, bustling with merchants and travelers from across Asia and beyond. But let's not get too misty-eyed about Akbar's utopian vision. His religious inclusivity wasn't without its critics. Some orthodox factions viewed Din-i-Ilahi with suspicion, if not outright hostility. They saw it as a dilution of their faith, a threat to traditional power structures. Akbar, ever the diplomat, navigated these choppy waters with a mix of charm and cunning. He knew that change often comes with resistance, and he was ready to face it head-on. The broader implications of Akbar's religious policies were profound. They laid the groundwork for a more pluralistic society, one where multiple faiths could coexist under a single imperial banner. This wasn't just about religious harmony. It was about creating a stable, prosperous empire that could withstand external threats and internal dissent. Akbar's vision was one of unity in diversity, a concept that resonates even today. Yet, as with all grand visions, the reality was messier. Not everyone bought into Akbar's dream of a harmonious empire. There were pockets of resistance, and not all of his successors shared his enlightened outlook. Some reverted to more orthodox policies, undoing much of the progress Akbar had made. It was a reminder that while visionary leadership can steer the course of history, it often faces headwinds from those clinging to the past. Akbar's legacy, however, endured. His reign set a precedent for religious tolerance in a world often divided by faith. It's a story of an emperor who dared to dream of a world where differences were celebrated, not feared. And while his Din-i-Ilahi might not have revolutionized religious practice, it symbolized a broader commitment to understanding and inclusion. As we continue to unravel the layers of Akbar's reign, remember that history is rarely black and white. It's a tapestry of ambition, innovation, and yes, a fair bit of chaos. Akbar was a complex figure, a man of his time, and yet somehow a man ahead of his time. His story is one of contradictions and compromises, of bold visions and practical realities. So, as we keep exploring, let's keep an eye on those contradictions, the places where Akbar's dreams met the gritty realities of empire building, because it's in those intersections that we find the true measure of his legacy. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more of Akbar's story to uncover, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. So, let's dive into the next chapter of Akbar's grand saga, where bricks and mortar meet art and elephants. Akbar, in his endless quest for legacy, didn't just want to leave behind an empire. He wanted to leave a footprint that could be seen from space, or at least from a passing elephant's back. First stop, Faidehpur Sikri. Picture this, an entire city springing out of the parched earth, a mirage turned reality, built on a sandstone ridge in the middle of nowhere. Akbar was like a kid with a new Lego set, but instead of plastic bricks, he had an army of architects and artisans. The city was constructed in just about 15 years, lightning speed by 16th century standards. It's like someone decided to build a new Dubai in the middle of medieval India, minus the air conditioning. Now, why Faidehpur Sikri? Well, it was more than just a real estate venture. It was a statement. Akbar wanted to establish a new capital that wasn't just a seat of power, but a symbol of his rule's grandeur and inclusivity. He chose the site after a Sufi saint, Salim Kishti, predicted he'd have an heir, and voila, the city was born. It was like Akbar's version of naming a star after someone, but with a lot more labor and a lot less paperwork. The architecture of Faidehpur Sikri was a melting pot of styles, Persian, Indian, Islamic, and even a hint of European influence. Akbar's court was a cultural potluck, and the city reflected that eclectic mix. The Buland Darwaza, or Gate of Magnificence, stood 40 meters high, an architectural mic drop that declared Akbar's ambitions to the world. It's like the medieval version of a skyscraper, screaming, "Look at me," to anyone within a 100-mile radius. Inside the city, the Diwan-i-Khas, or Hall of Private Audiences, was a marvel of design. This is where Akbar held court with the likes of thinkers, philosophers, and anyone who could hold a decent debate. Picture TED talks, but with more turbans and less PowerPoint. The hall itself was an octagonal wonder, with a central pillar that branched out like a stone tree supporting the emperor's platform. It was a literal and figurative elevation of dialogue and intellect. But Faidehpur Sikri wasn't just about grand buildings and intellectual banter. It was also a hub of artistic innovation. Akbar was a patron of the arts, and his court thrived with musicians, painters, and poets. He was like a 16th century Medici, but with a penchant for pachyderms. His love for elephants was legendary. He had an entire stable of them, each more ornately decorated than the last. They were as much a part of his court as the artists and scholars, often paraded in grand processions that rivaled the pomp of any modern-day parade. Akbar's patronage of the arts wasn't just for show. It was a political tool, a way to project power and stability. Take, for instance, the Mughal miniature paintings that flourished under his reign. These weren't just pretty pictures. They were detailed records of court life, battles, and mythology, capturing the essence of Akbar's empire in vibrant colors. It's akin to Instagram today, a carefully curated snapshot of one's world, meant to impress and inspire. Then there's Akbar's library, a bibliophile's dream. With over 24,000 volumes, it was one of the largest in the world at the time. He invited scholars from across the realm to translate works into Persian, the lingua franca of the court. This wasn't just about hoarding books. It was about knowledge as power. Akbar understood that the pen was mightier than the sword, and he wielded it with precision. But let's not get too starry-eyed. Faidapour Sikri, despite its grandeur, was a logistical nightmare. The city was abandoned after a mere 14 years as the capital due to water shortages. It's a classic case of ambition outpacing practicality, a reminder that even emperors can't bend nature to their will. The city stands today as a ghostly testament to Akbar's vision, a beautiful ruin that whispers of past glories and the harsh realities that curtailed them. And yet, Akbar's cultural contributions echoed far beyond the sandstone walls of Faidapour Sikri. His reign saw the rise of Urdu as a language, born from the confluence of Persian and local dialects. It was a linguistic reflection of the empire's diversity, a testament to Akbar's commitment to fusion over division. In the arts, literature, and architecture, his influence was a river that flowed through the veins of Indian culture, nourishing and shaping it for generations. Even today, Akbar's impact is felt in India's cultural landscape. The fusion of styles and ideas that characterized his court can be seen in everything from Bollywood's storytelling to the country's vibrant culinary scene. Akbar was the original cultural curator, a maestro who orchestrated a symphony of influences that has resonated across centuries. So, as we wrap up this dive into Akbar's cultural legacy, let's toast to an emperor who dared to dream big, who saw a barren ridge and envisioned a city, who believed in the power of art and ideas to shape an empire. And while his visions sometimes faltered, the echoes of his ambition continue to inspire, a reminder that history's greatest legacies are often born from the boldest dreams. Stay tuned, because Akbar's story is far from over, and there's more to uncover in the next chapter of this epic tale. So, as the dust settles on the grand vision that was Faidapour Sikri, find ourselves turning the page to the final chapters of Akbar's storied reign. This is where the narrative shifts from architectural marvels to the human drama that defines dynastic rule, a soap opera with more elephants than dragons, and enough intrigue to make Downton Abbey look like a Sunday picnic. Akbar, with all his visionary zeal, couldn't escape the age-old dilemma of succession. For a ruler who managed to unite diverse peoples and cultures under one banner, choosing an heir proved to be as tricky as juggling flaming swords. Enter his sons, Salim, Murad, and Daniel, a trio whose antics could fill a season's worth of reality TV. Salim, the eldest, was the heir apparent, but he had a penchant for rebellion, a fondness for the battle, and a tendency to clash with his father's vision. By the 1590s, when Akbar was in his late 50s, the cracks in the imperial family facade began to show. Salim, impatient for power, declared himself emperor in 1600 while Akbar was still very much alive. Imagine the family awkwardness at the next dinner party. Akbar, no stranger to political chess, decided against a public showdown. Instead, he played it cool, like a seasoned diplomat navigating a particularly tense summit. He knew that Salim's ambitions could destabilize the empire he'd spent decades building. The drama intensified when Murad died in 1599, and Daniel followed in 1605, both reportedly victims of their own vices. It was like watching a Shakespearean tragedy unfold, with the Mughal court as the stage. Akbar, despite his frustrations, was forced to reconcile with Salim, who would eventually ascend the throne as Emperor Jahangir. It was a classic case of better the devil you know, with Akbar choosing stability over chaos. But let's not paint Salim as just a rebellious son. As Jahangir, he would continue some of Akbar's policies, albeit with his own flair. He wasn't quite the visionary his father was, but he kept the empire on an even keel, at least for a while. The succession drama, however, highlighted a universal truth. Even the greatest leaders can't control everything, and the future is often a wild card. Now, stepping back from the personal soap opera, let's consider Akbar's broader legacy. This wasn't just a man who built cities and expanded borders. He was a cultural alchemist, blending diverse traditions into a cohesive imperial identity. His policies of religious tolerance and administrative reform weren't just forward-thinking, they were revolutionary. By abolishing the jizya tax and introducing the Mansabdari system, Akbar laid the groundwork for an empire that prioritized unity over division, a lesson in governance that remains relevant today. Economically, Akbar's reign was a golden age. The empire's GDP was among the highest in the world, driven by agriculture, trade, and a relatively stable currency system. His fostering of trade routes, like the Grand Trunk Road, ensured a flow of goods and ideas that enriched the empire's coffers and culture alike. It's like Akbar had a sixth sense for what made an empire not just survive, but thrive. Culturally, Akbar was a maestro, orchestrating a symphony of arts that resonated far beyond his reign. His patronage of the arts led to the flourishing of Mughal miniature painting, a genre that captured the vibrancy of his court's life. These intricate works were more than just art. They were historical records, offering a glimpse into the daily life and grand events of the Mughal era. His encouragement of literature, music, and architecture left an indelible mark on India's cultural landscape, a legacy that echoes in the country's artistic expressions even today. And yet, as with all grand narratives, there's a flip side. Not everyone was a fan of Akbar's policies. His attempts at religious syncretism, particularly with Din-i-Ilahi, were viewed with suspicion by orthodox factions. They saw his inclusivity as a threat to traditional power structures, a sentiment that would resurface in various forms long after his death. It's a reminder that change, no matter how well-intentioned, often meets resistance from those invested in the status quo. But let's not end on a purely critical note. Akbar's legacy is one of vision and ambition, of a ruler who dared to dream big and reshape the world around him. His reign was a tapestry woven with threads of tolerance, innovation, and cultural richness, a testament to what can be achieved when leadership transcends mere conquest. He was a man of contradictions, a warrior and a peacemaker, a ruler and a philosopher, and it's these contradictions that make his story so compelling. As we close the book on Akbar's reign, consider how he might fit into today's world. Imagine him as a podcast guest, sharing insights into leadership, unity, and the art of managing an empire that was as diverse as it was vast. Picture him discussing the importance of dialogue in bridging divides, or the role of culture in shaping a society's identity. You'd tune in, wouldn't you? After all, who wouldn't want to hear from the emperor who turned a patchwork of territories into one of history's most enduring empires? Akbar's story is a reminder that history is a living, breathing entity, shaped by those bold enough to leave a mark. And while the sands of time may have eroded some of the monuments he built, the ideals he championed continue to inspire. So here's to Akbar, the emperor who dreamed beyond the horizon, a fitting finale for a saga that was as grand and complex as the man himself. When you think of urban planning, your mind might wander to the bustling streets of New York, or maybe the quirky charm of a European old town square. But hold on to your blueprints, because the folks in the Indus Valley might have been the original city slickers. Yep, around 3,300 to 1,300 BCE, long before anyone decided to name a street after an obscure historical figure, the Indus Valley civilization set up shop between what we now call Pakistan and northwest India, and frankly, they were crushing it. Now, why this particular stretch of land, you ask? Well, if you were an ancient civilization looking for a place to drop your metaphorical pin, the Indus Valley had all the allure of beachfront property. Sandwiched between the Indus and Ghaggar-Hakra rivers, this region was prime real estate. Think fertile plains, abundant water supply, and a climate agreeable enough to keep your crops happy. For those ancient farmers, it was the Bronze Age version of a modern-day Zillow gem. Stunning river views, lush farmland, and plenty of elbow room. And let's not forget the timeline. We're talking about a civilization that reached its peak between 2600 and 1900 BCE. That's right. While the Egyptians were busy stacking limestone blocks and the Mesopotamians were scribbling on clay tablets, the residents of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were busy laying down the grid. These cities weren't just slapped together in a rush of bricks and hopes. They were meticulously planned, with streets laid out in a neat grid pattern. It's like they had a thing for symmetry, and who doesn't love a little order in their chaos? But it gets better. These urbanites didn't just stop at drawing straight lines. They had drainage systems that would make your local city planner weep with envy. Imagine this, a network of brick-lined drains running alongside the streets, designed to whisk away the waste and rain like a well-oiled machine. Talk about thinking ahead. While the rest of the world was still figuring out how not to trip over their own feet, the Indus Valley had sanitation down to an art form. It's almost like they took a look at the mess other civilizations were making and decided, we can do better. And do better they did. The houses in these cities were no shabby huts. Most were built with standardized baked bricks, a uniformity that's not just aesthetically pleasing but practical. Each house came with its own bathroom, connected to the sophisticated sewer system. They even had wells to ensure a steady water supply. If you're feeling a bit jealous of their Bronze Age conveniences, you're not alone. They were living the dream, with indoor plumbing, while the rest of the world was still figuring out fire. But before we get too carried away with admiration, let's throw a little myth-busting into the mix. The idea of these cities as utopias is tempting, but it's not all sunshine and engineered waterways. Archaeological evidence suggests that, like any bustling metropolis, they had their share of problems. There's evidence of social stratification, with some homes significantly larger and more elaborate than others. Plus, there's the mystery of their decline. By around 1900 BCE, the civilization began to fade, leaving behind abandoned cities and countless unanswered questions. So, as we dive into the complexities of Indus Valley society, remember that it's not just about marveling at their city planning prowess. It's about understanding the interplay of geography, technology, and human ambition that allowed them to thrive, and ultimately, why they didn't. The next time you find yourself grumbling about potholes or traffic jams, spare a thought for the Indus Valley's urban masterminds. They were the OGs of city planning, and their legacy is as enduring as those ancient bricks. While the Indus Valley folks might have been city planners extraordinaire, thinking they were also egalitarian is a bit like assuming everyone in a skyscraper pays the same rent. Let's take a peek behind those standardized bricks to uncover the social pecking order lurking beneath. Spoiler alert, it wasn't all conveyors and equal square footage. Picture the grand cityscape of Mohenjo-Daro. If you were strolling down its meticulously planned streets, you'd notice some homes that scream VIP access only, with their multiple stories and private courtyards. Meanwhile, others were more like cozy studio with a view of your neighbor's wall. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of homes ranging from a modest 45 square meters to a sprawling 250 square meters. It's the Bronze Age version of a gated community versus a cramped apartment block. Wealth and status, it seems, have been playing hide and seek with equality for millennia. And it wasn't just the architecture that hinted at social stratification. The artifacts tell a story too. In the grander homes, you'd find fancier pottery, intricate jewelry, and maybe even a few imported goods. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of designer labels and the latest tech gadgets. Meanwhile, the less affluent might have been content with local wares and a simpler lifestyle. It's a bit like comparing a hand-me-down smartphone to the latest iPhone release. Both make calls, but one clearly does it with more flair. Now, let's talk sharp. The Indus Valley wasn't just a one-trick pony of farmers tilling the fields. This civilization was a bustling hub of artisans, merchants, and more. Artisans were the unsung heroes, crafting everything from pottery to metalworks. And let's not forget those iconic seals, tiny masterpieces displaying animals and symbols. These little squares of art were more than just decorative. They were likely used for trade, stamping goods with a mark of authenticity. Merchants, on the other hand, were the go-getters, possibly traveling as far as Mesopotamia to swap goods. They were the ancient road warriors, negotiating deals and bringing back exotic items, like lapis lazuli, to dazzle the locals. But hold your applause, because this society wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for everyone. Women might have been more than just background characters, though. Some evidence, like female figurines and burial goods, suggests they played significant roles, perhaps in domestic management or even trade. Yet, the specifics remain as elusive as a cat on a hot tin roof. It's like trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the dog's eaten the barks. So, what about the folks who kept the whole operation running, the farmers? They were the backbone, cultivating wheat, barley, and other crops, making sure the city dwellers didn't starve. It's a bit like being the unsung producer of a blockbuster movie. Without them, the show simply wouldn't go on. Their work was crucial, yet they probably lived simpler lives, closer to the fields than to the city's bustling heart. In diving into these layers of society, it's clear that the Indus Valley was a complex tapestry of classes and occupations, each thread contributing to the civilization's overall vibrancy. But like any society, it had its fair share of inequalities and hierarchies. The myth of a perfectly harmonious and egalitarian Indus society is in many ways a fairy tale. It's romantic to think of a world where everyone lives equally, but reality is messier, richer, and infinitely more intriguing. As we continue to explore the intricacies of the Indus Valley, it's important to remember that history isn't just a collection of facts and dates. It's a mosaic of human ambition, struggle, and innovation. And while we've only scratched the surface of this ancient civilization's social structure, there's much more to uncover. From the enigmatic script that remains undeciphered to the mystery of their decline, the Indus Valley continues to challenge our understanding and spark our curiosity. So, buckle up, because this is just the beginning. While we've only scratched the surface of this ancient civilization's social structure, the economy of the Indus Valley was a beast of its own. And it's high time we took a deep dive into this barter-based system that would make even the savviest modern trader sweat. If you thought today's global trading networks were impressive, the Indus folks were the original hustlers, crafting a commercial network that stretched all the way to Mesopotamia. That's like trading across continents without the luxury of Google Maps, just pure grit and a bit of luck. Picture those carnelian beads glistening in the sun, a hot commodity back then. These beads were the bling of the Bronze Age, and if you had some, you were basically the Kanye West of the ancient world. But it wasn't just shiny stuff they were exchanging. The Indus Valley's shopping list included copper, textiles, and pottery, with a side order of agricultural products like wheat and barley. This trade wasn't just about keeping up with the Joneses. It was essential for the civilization's survival. The Indus people didn't just wake up one day and decide to become trading moguls. No, they had a strategy. They used the mighty Indus River as their trade highway, aquatic autobahn if you will, allowing them to transport goods efficiently. Mesopotamian records even mention a region called Meluha, believed by many historians to be the Indus Valley. These mentions aren't just idle gossip. They're the ancient equivalent of Yelp reviews, validating the Indus Valley as a trading powerhouse. So how did they keep this bustling bazaar from spiraling into chaos? Enter standardized weights and measures, the unsung heroes of their economy. Imagine trying to barter without a common understanding of weight. Nightmare, right? The Indus people nailed it, creating uniform weights that fit neatly into a decimal system. These little stone cubes were the real MVPs, ensuring that a pound of carnelian in Mohenjo-Daro matched a pound of carnelian in Lathal. It's like they invented a Bronze Age ISO certification, and frankly, our modern systems could take a leaf out of their book. And let's not forget those iconic seals. Small, square, and usually made of steedite, these seals were the ancient equivalent of branding. They bore intricate designs of animals, mythical creatures, and symbols, each one serving as a unique identifier for merchants and their goods. Think of them as business cards that also doubled as security devices. When traders stamped their wares, it wasn't just about marking ownership. It was about quality assurance. If you saw a seal with a unicorn, you knew you were dealing with the Louis Vuitton of the Indus Valley. But before we get too swept away in the romance of this ancient trade utopia, let's bring it back to reality. Just like today, trade was fraught with challenges. Picture this, navigating treacherous rivers, dealing with the unpredictability of nature and the ever-present risk of piracy. The Indus traders were the OGs of risk management, calculating their moves to ensure that they could keep the goods flowing and the economy thriving. So why does this matter, you ask? Why should we care about a civilization that's been dust for millennia? Because understanding their economy offers us a lens into how a society balances ambition with practicality. It's a story of innovation, adaptation, and sometimes sheer stubbornness, all traits that continue to drive human progress today. The Indus Valley folks were not just trading goods. They were exchanging ideas, fostering connections that transcended their borders and echoed through history. As we continue to unravel the intricacies of this ancient economy, remember that behind every carnelian bead and stamped seal lies a story of human endeavor and ingenuity. The Indus Valley wasn't just a chapter in history. It was a whole genre, full of twists, turns, and a fair share of cliffhangers. So, keep those mental gears turning and your curiosity piqued. There's plenty more to discover about this civilization that, despite being long gone, still manages to captivate and challenge us today. Now that we've unraveled the commercial web spun by the Indus Valley folks, it's time to take a detour into the political labyrinth, or the lack thereof. Yep, you heard it right. In a world where pharaohs were busy carving their likenesses into stone and Mesopotamian kings were writing laws with a flourish, the Indus Valley civilization was pulling a political Houdini. No palaces, no temples, and nary a throne in sight. It's as if they took one long look at the global trend of royal egos and said, "Nah, we're good." The absence of towering temples and kingly residences in Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro isn't just an architectural quirk. It's a historical enigma wrapped in a mystery. You'd think a civilization with a penchant for urban planning and standardized bricks would also have a thing for grandiose palaces, or at least a slightly ostentatious government building. But nope, you'd be wrong. Instead, what we find is a conspicuous void where you'd expect a royal court or a divine sanctuary. It's like opening a box of chocolates and finding celery sticks instead. Unexpected, to say the least. So what does this architectural minimalism say about their governance? Theories abound, each as intriguing as the last. One idea suggests that the Indus Valley might have been run by a theocratic system where religious leaders held the reins of power. But here's the kicker. We haven't found evidence of any temples, either. It's like claiming to have a church-run state without a single steeple in sight. A bit of a head-scratcher, isn't it? Another possibility is that they operated on a decentralized, council-based governance. Imagine a group of wise, maybe even slightly eccentric, elders or merchants sitting around a table making decisions for the community. It's the Bronze Age version of a board meeting without the PowerPoint presentations and stale coffee. This setup might have allowed for a more egalitarian distribution of power, avoiding the pitfalls of a single ruler's whims. Or it might have led to chaos akin to herding cats when trying to make a unified decision. The jury's still out on whether this was their secret sauce or their Achilles heel. Now, let's pause here and appreciate the audacity of such a system, if indeed it existed. In an era where kings were often revered as gods, living or otherwise, the Indus folks seem to have taken a more grounded approach. No divine right of kings, just people trying to get along and make a civilization work. It's a bit like deciding you don't need a CEO and opting for a flat hierarchy instead. Bold, risky, and possibly brilliant. But before we get too caught up in the romance of this ancient democratic ideal, let's not forget the practicalities. Without a central figure to rally around, how did they manage large-scale projects like those impressive drainage systems or the standardization of weights? It's like trying to pull off a flash mob without a choreographer, possible but challenging. Perhaps this is why some historians speculate that their political system, whatever it was, might have played a role in their eventual decline. Without a unifying force, could they have struggled to adapt to changing circumstances? Despite the head-scratching absence of kings or temples, the Indus Valley's political landscape, or lack thereof, offers a tantalizing glimpse into a society that dared to be different. Whether it was an enlightened experiment in communal governance or a system that ultimately left them vulnerable, the mystery remains. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good mystery? The kind that keeps you up at night, wondering if you'll ever piece together the puzzle. As we ponder these possibilities, it's essential to remember that history is not a static storybook, but a living tapestry, woven with the threads of human ambition, failure, and innovation. The Indus Valley's political mystery isn't just an academic curiosity. It challenges our understanding of how societies can be structured and what happens when they defy convention. So, as we prepare to delve deeper into this enigmatic civilization, keep those questions simmering. Because the truth, as they say, is often stranger than fiction, especially when it involves an ancient world content to leave the trappings of power to others. So, if you're still with me, wading through the mysteries of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro like a detective sifting through ancient evidence, let's dive into the decline of this Bronze Age wonder. Picture it, an entire civilization that once thrived like a well-oiled machine, suddenly losing steam. What went wrong? Well, theories abound, and they offer a glimpse into what might just be ancient history's most epic game of Clue. First up, we've got climate change as a prime suspect. Now, I know what you're thinking. Climate change. Isn't that just a modern buzzword? But hold up, because the Indus Valley folks might have been the original victims of Mother Nature's mood swings. Around 1800 BCE, a major shift in monsoon patterns could have thrown their agricultural calendar into chaos. Imagine relying on the rain for your crops, only to find it's ghosted you like a bad Tinder date. Not exactly the best way to keep a civilization running smoothly. Then there's the theory that they overused their land, farming like there was no tomorrow, until the soil was as tired as a parent on a Monday morning. Intensive agriculture can be a double-edged sword, great for yields in the short term, but potentially disastrous in the long run. Just ask the folks from Easter Island. Deforestation and soil degradation might have turned their fertile plains into something less productive, leaving them scrambling for sustenance. And let's talk about those rivers. The Gagahakra River, potentially the Sarasvati of Vedic fame, started to dry up around this time. Water is life, as they say, and with the river receding, the Indus Valley cities lost their lifeline. It's like someone unplugged the civilization's power source, and the lights started to flicker. Now, if environmental woes weren't enough, add a dash of social upheaval to the mix. With resources dwindling, tensions could have risen faster than a loaf of bread in a proving draw. The egalitarian governance, or lack thereof, they might have enjoyed could have crumbled under the pressure, leading to internal strife. Without a strong central power to steer the ship, they were like a rudderless boat in a stormy sea. But wait, there's more. Some scholars point the finger at trade collapses. Remember those Carnelian beads and Mesopotamian trade routes? If these fell apart due to regional instability or external competition, the economic backbone of this civilization could have snapped. It's like having your Spotify playlist suddenly wiped, devastating for your vibe and your social standing. And let's not forget the possibility of an ancient PR disaster. If the elite couldn't deliver on their promise of prosperity, you can bet there were some disgruntled citizens ready to jump ship. Leadership failures could have turned a slow decline into a rapid collapse, as confidence in the system eroded faster than a sandcastle at high tide. So, what can we learn from this slow fade into obscurity? For starters, sustainability and resilience aren't just modern buzzwords. The Indus Valley's decline is a cautionary tale about the importance of adapting to environmental changes and managing resources wisely. It's like they were shouting across the millennia, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But alas, hindsight is 20/20, even when you're peering back 4,000 years. Despite their decline, the Indus Valley civilization left a legacy that echoes through the ages. Their innovations in urban planning, trade, and governance were ahead of their time, laying a foundation that future societies would build upon. They showed us that you don't need a king or a temple to create a thriving metropolis. Sometimes, all you need is a good street plan and a well-placed drain. In our high-speed, Wi-Fi-connected world, where the pace of life often feels like a never-ending sprint, the story of the Indus Valley civilization serves as a reminder to slow down and consider the long game. Their rise and fall illustrate the delicate balance between ambition and sustainability, a lesson that remains as relevant today as it was in their time. So, the next time you're caught in traffic, cursing the city planners for their lack of foresight, spare a thought for those ancient urbanites who paved the way, quite literally, for the cities we live in now. Their story is a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the enduring quest for a better life. And while we may never fully solve the mysteries of their decline, the questions they leave behind continue to challenge and inspire us. As we wrap up this journey through the Indus Valley, remember that history is not just a series of dates and events. It's a living tapestry of human experience, a mirror reflecting our past mistakes and triumphs. The Indus Valley civilization may have faded into obscurity, but their story remains a vital thread in the fabric of our shared history. So keep those questions burning, keep digging deeper, and who knows, maybe the next piece of the puzzle is just waiting to be discovered. In the bustling world of ancient trade, the Phoenicians were the cool kids with the new tech toy everyone wanted to borrow. Picture the scene around 1050 BCE, bustling harbors, ships loaded with exotic goods, and merchants chattering away in a multitude of dialects. It was like a chaotic Mediterranean version of Wall Street, minus the smartphones and power suits. Enter the Phoenician alphabet, a game changer as surprising as a cat meme going viral. Sure, there was writing before them, but it was about as user-friendly as a tax form. The Phoenicians took a different route, They crafted a sleek set of 22 letters, a minimalist masterpiece that got straight to the point. The Phoenician alphabet was simplicity itself, which was precisely the point. Imagine trying to carve out verbose poetry on a clay tablet while haggling over a shipment of purple dye. No, thank you. Instead, these letters were designed for speed and efficiency, the ancient equivalent of a shorthand text message. This wasn't about waxing lyrical. It was about getting the job done. The Phoenician merchants were pragmatists at heart, and their alphabet mirrored their no-nonsense approach to business. Their writing system was like the early version of a smartphone keyboard, but instead of emojis, you had letters that could be combined to create an endless array of words. Why did this matter so much? Well, for starters, the Phoenicians were the maritime masters of their time, trading everything from precious metals to glass, and their prized possession, Tyrian purple dye. This dye, extracted from the murex snail, was worth its weight in gold. Literally. A pound of the stuff could fetch a price equivalent to thousands of dollars today. With goods this valuable, communication had to be as clear as the Mediterranean waters they sailed. Alphabet was the tool that allowed these sea-savvy traders to spread their influence far and wide, from the coasts of North Africa to the shores of Spain. But let's not romanticize it too much. The Phoenician alphabet wasn't born out of some noble quest for universal literacy. Its creation was driven by sheer practicality, a necessity for keeping track of complex trade deals and contracts. You see, trade was the lifeblood of the Phoenician city-states like Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. Political power, sure they had it, but it was their economic prowess that truly set them apart. Their alphabet was the grease in the wheels of commerce, ensuring that transactions could be recorded and understood quickly. Now, here's a juicy tidbit. Our beloved alphabet, the one you're reading right now, owes a debt to these ancient merchants. That's right, the Phoenician script is the great-grandparent of the Latin alphabet, used by billions today. This isn't just some dry historical footnote. It's a testament to the Phoenicians' lasting influence. Their alphabet was adopted and adapted by the Greeks, who added vowels, because, let's face it, trying to read without vowels is like trying to solve a crossword puzzle with half the clues missing. The Romans later borrowed the Greek script, and voila, the alphabet as we know it was born. Of course, the spread of the Phoenician alphabet wasn't just about trade. It was also about power and prestige. Being able to read and write was akin to having insider knowledge on Wall Street. Those who mastered the script wielded influence, and as the alphabet spread, so too did the cultural and economic clout of those who used it. It's tempting to imagine the Phoenicians as a band of swashbuckling entrepreneurs, their ships slicing through the waves as they spread their alphabetic gospel. And while that's partly true, it's also essential to acknowledge the harsh realities. This was a world where trade was often a double-edged sword, bringing prosperity but also conflict. The Phoenicians had to navigate a political landscape as treacherous as the seas they sailed. Their neighbors weren't always thrilled with their success, and their wealth made them targets for conquest. Despite these challenges, the Phoenician alphabet endured, outliving the empire that created it. It became a bridge between cultures, connecting disparate peoples through a shared linguistic tool. It's a testament to the power of simplicity and the impact of clear communication. So next time you fire off a quick text or jot down a note, spare a thought for those ancient traders who, in their quest for efficiency, left us a legacy that continues to shape our world. So, as you're scrolling through your phone or scribbling a quick note, remember that the Phoenicians weren't just about pretty letters. They were the original efficiency experts of the ancient world. Now let's shift our focus to the real meat and potatoes of Phoenician life, trade. In the ancient Mediterranean, the Phoenicians weren't just catching the economic wave. They were the wave. Let's start from the heart of it all, Tyre and Sidon. These bustling ports were the beating heart of Phoenician commerce and shipbuilding. Think of them as the Silicon Valley of maritime trade. Ships loaded with goods were in and out like a fast food drive-through at lunch hour. The alphabet, with its 22 streamlined characters, was the secret sauce that made negotiating deals as straightforward as ordering a burger. It was like sending a WhatsApp message to seal a deal, minus the blue ticks and last seen feature. Trade wasn't just a local affair. Phoenician networks stretched like a spider's web across the Mediterranean. Picture it. From the sun-kissed shores of North Africa to the rocky coasts of Iberia, Phoenician ships covered roughly 500 miles of sea routes. This wasn't a leisurely sail. We're talking full-throttle maritime adventure. And why did they venture so far? For starters, they were after silver from Spain, tin from Britain, and let's not forget the ever-coveted Tyrian purple dye. To put things into perspective, the Phoenicians had a trade network that would have made even Jeff Bezos green with envy. They had colonies as far-flung as Carthage, which was founded around 814 BCE in modern-day Tunisia. Carthage was more than just a trading post. It was a strategic powerhouse, a hub that linked the Phoenician homeland to their farthest markets. Think of it as their version of a corporate headquarters, minus the coffee machines and PowerPoint presentations. Now, let's talk numbers. Phoenician ships, those sleek, fast-moving galleys, weren't just for show. They were designed for efficiency. A typical merchant vessel could carry about 450 tons of cargo. That's a lot of purple dye and shiny metal. The ships were so well crafted that they could cover up to 100 miles in a day under favorable conditions. Not exactly Amazon Prime, but pretty impressive for the time. But let's not romanticize these traders as altruistic explorers. This was a cutthroat business, and the Phoenicians were in it for the profit. Their alphabet was the tool that kept their economy humming, ensuring that contracts were clear and enforceable. No room for misunderstandings when you're dealing with goods worth more than a king's ransom. The alphabet was like a legal pad, a notary, and a contract lawyer all rolled into one. Speaking of contracts, let's not forget the brutal realities of trade in the ancient world. This wasn't a land of fair play and open markets. The Phoenicians had to navigate a complex web of alliances and rivalries. The sea routes were fraught with pirates, and rival states were always looking to muscle in on their action. The Phoenicians weren't just traders. They were diplomats, negotiators, and when necessary, warriors. They knew how to play the game, leveraging their alphabet as a tool for both commerce and diplomacy. Economically, the Phoenicians were the Wall Street brokers of their time. Their trade routes were the arteries of a vast economic system, pumping wealth and goods throughout the Mediterranean. They traded luxury items like ivory and gold, but they also dealt in everyday staples like salt and fish. It was this diversification that kept their economy resilient, allowing them to weather the storms of political and military upheaval. But the Phoenician story isn't all about economic triumph and cultural exchange. There's a darker side to this tale. The prosperity of the Phoenician city-states often came at a human cost. Trade in the ancient world wasn't just about goods, it also involved people. Slavery was an unfortunate reality, and the Phoenicians, like many of their contemporaries, weren't above it. It's a sobering reminder that the wheels of commerce have always been greased by more than just coin. Despite these harsh realities, the Phoenician legacy endures. Their alphabet was more than just a tool for trade. It was a cultural bridge that connected diverse peoples. It was a unifying force in a fragmented world, a testament to the power of communication and the enduring impact of a simple but revolutionary idea. So, as we continue to explore the Phoenician world, let's keep in mind both the romance and the reality, the triumphs and the tragedies of this remarkable civilization. Yet, it's in the interplay of ideas, not just goods, that the Phoenicians truly made waves. Imagine them as the ultimate overachievers of cultural exchange, hosting the ancient Mediterranean's version of a TED talk circuit. They weren't just swapping silver and spices. They were trading in thoughts and innovations, and their alphabet was the microphone that amplified these ideas across the ancient world. Let's set the stage. As Phoenician ships glided from port to port, they were like floating universities. Merchants weren't just haggling over prices. They were swapping stories, forging friendships, and sowing the seeds of cultural exchange. The Phoenician alphabet, sleek and efficient, was the tool that made this possible. It was as revolutionary as a live-streamed conference, allowing ideas to flow as freely as the goods in their cargo holds. And speaking of ideas, let's talk about the Greek connection. The Greeks, those philosophical heavyweights, were like eager students in this cultural classroom. They didn't just adopt the Phoenician alphabet. They gave it a makeover, adding vowels and tweaking it to suit their linguistic style. It was like taking a basic smartphone and transforming it into the latest high-tech gadget. This wasn't mere imitation. It was a creative evolution. But let's not get carried away with the myth of the Phoenicians as the sole progenitors of Western civilization. Sure, They provided the building blocks, but the Greeks took those blocks and constructed an intellectual empire. The Phoenicians may have given them the alphabet, but the Greeks ran with it, penning epic poems and philosophical treatises that still resonate today. If the Phoenician alphabet was the early internet, Greeks were the content creators, the influencers of their age. Now, let's head westward to Rome, where the alphabet underwent another transformation. The Romans, ever the pragmatists, borrowed the Greek script, streamlined it further, and spread it across their vast empire. If the Greeks were the artists, the Romans were the engineers, and the alphabet was their blueprint for cultural cohesion. It was a linguistic glue that held together a diverse empire, from Britannia to Egypt. Hold on. Before we credit the Phoenicians with inventing everything short of sliced bread, let's add some nuance. The Phoenicians were undoubtedly influential, but they were also opportunists, adapting and borrowing as much as they innovated. Their genius lay in their ability to synthesize and disseminate, not in solitary invention. They were the ultimate middlemen, the connectors in a network of ancient ideas. In truth, the Phoenician influence was like an ancient cocktail, a potent blend of practicality and creativity poured over the rocks of necessity. And while the Greeks and Romans took that concoction and added their own flavors, the Phoenician base notes remained unmistakable. But what about the myths that paint Phoenicians as the sole architects of the Western alphabet? The reality is messier, as history often is. While the Phoenicians laid the groundwork, the subsequent civilizations built skyscrapers of knowledge on that foundation. Their contributions were monumental, yes, but they were part of a broader tapestry of cultural exchange. And let's not forget the practical reality of why the Phoenicians spread their alphabet in the first place. This wasn't some altruistic quest for universal literacy. It was born of economic necessity, a tool to streamline trade and enforce contracts. The spread of their script was less about cultural magnanimity and more about ensuring that their economic engine kept humming smoothly. So, as we unravel the lore surrounding the Phoenician alphabet, remember that it's a story of both myth and reality. The romantic image of them as cultural benefactors is appealing, but the truth is more complex. They were first and foremost traders driven by the bottom line. Yet in their quest for profit, they inadvertently became cultural ambassadors, bridging gaps between civilizations and sowing seeds of knowledge that would bloom for centuries. In this narrative, the Phoenicians emerge not just as merchants of goods, but as merchants of ideas, their alphabet the vessel through which these ideas traveled. It's a testament to the power of communication and the unintended consequences of human enterprise. So next time you jot down a note or type out a message, remember that you're participating in a legacy of exchange that spans millennia. As we continue to explore the Phoenician world, let's keep in mind the complexity and contradictions of their legacy. They were harbingers of both trade and transformation, their influence a mosaic of commerce and culture. In the end, the Phoenician alphabet was more than just a tool. It was a catalyst for change, a testament to the enduring power of a simple yet revolutionary idea. As we sail forward in this epic saga of the Phoenician alphabet, let's swan dive into the political whirlpool that both created and was churned by this nifty script. The Phoenicians weren't just dabbling in trade. They were playing chess on a geopolitical board where the stakes were as high as the masts of their ships. Here, the alphabet wasn't just a tool of trade, but a pawn, knight, and queen in their diplomatic arsenal. Take a deep breath, because we're diving headfirst into the bureaucratic chaos that was the ancient Mediterranean political scene. Picture a world where treaties were as common as Starbucks on a city block, and just as varied in quality. The Phoenicians were masters of the ancient PR game, crafting agreements that were as slippery as an eel in olive oil. They inked deals with the likes of the Egyptians, Assyrians, and Hittites, using their alphabet to ensure everyone was on the same papyrus page. In fact, the very word alphabet comes from the first two letters of the Phoenician script, Aleph and Beth. Talk about branding. These weren't just packs of peace, mind you. They were strategic maneuvers, contracts written in Phoenician script that often included clauses sneakier than a cat burglar. For instance, a treaty between Tyre and Egypt might have looked like a simple friendship bracelet exchange, but hidden in the clauses were agreements on mutual non-aggression and trade favors that would make Wall Street lawyers weep with envy. The Phoenicians knew that a well-drafted treaty was worth more than a fleet of warships. Now, let's talk taxes, because who doesn't love a good tax story? The Phoenicians were no strangers to the age-old art of squeezing coins from their subjects. Yet, they did it with a finesse that would make a modern tax accountant proud. The alphabet allowed them to keep meticulous records of who owed what and when, transforming tax collection from a chaotic shakedown into a bureaucratic ballet. They were able to levy taxes on goods passing through their ports with the precision of a Swiss watch. It was like having a toll booth on every sea lane, and you can bet they made sure to collect their dues. But the Phoenician script wasn't just about keeping track of shekels and drachmas. It was a tool of propaganda, a way to control the narrative in an era when most people's idea of news was whatever the local bard decided to sing about. By committing their stories to writing, the Phoenicians could spread their version of events far and wide. Imagine ancient newsletters circulating in the markets, recounting tales of Phoenician bravery and benevolence, while conveniently glossing over any inconvenient truths. It was like the ancient world's version of spin doctoring. Speaking of inconvenient truths, let's not forget the wars. The Mediterranean was a cauldron of conflict, and the Phoenicians were often right in the thick of it. Their alphabet was the unsung hero of military logistics, a way to issue orders and keep track of troop movements without the cumbersome hieroglyphs of their Egyptian neighbors. It was the ancient equivalent of sending a text, ensuring that generals and admirals were always in the loop. Of course, not every Phoenician city-state was on the same page. Tyre and Sidon might have shared a language, but they didn't always share interests. Rivalries were as common as barnacles on a ship's hull, and wars between these city-states could erupt over something as trivial as a disputed trade route or a particularly juicy batch of murex snails. The alphabet was the silent witness to these squabbles, recording the minutiae of treaties and battles in its straightforward script. Yet, for all their political machinations, the Phoenicians were also adept at reading the winds of change. When the Assyrians came knocking with their formidable army, the Phoenicians didn't reach for their swords. Instead, they reached for their pens, crafting diplomatic overtures that placated the Assyrian kings and allowed them to maintain a degree of autonomy. It was a delicate dance, balancing power and diplomacy on the edge of a quill. But let's not get too misty-eyed over these ancient diplomats. The Phoenicians were pragmatists, and their diplomacy was often as ruthless as their trade. They leveraged their alphabet to set the terms of engagement, ensuring that they always had the upper hand in negotiations. It was a Game of Thrones long before George R.R. Martin put pen to paper, and the stakes were just as high. In the end, the Phoenician alphabet was more than just a collection of letters. It was a tool of power in a world where words were both weapons and shields. It shaped the political landscape as surely as the tides shaped their harbors. The Phoenicians used it to navigate the choppy waters of geopolitics with a deftness that would make Machiavelli proud. But don't think for a moment that this is where our story ends. We've only begun to scratch the surface of the Phoenician influence. Their alphabet was a catalyst for change, but it was also a bridge between peoples, a testament to the power of communication in an age where everything was negotiable, from peace treaties to the price of purple dye. So stay tuned as we continue to unravel the threads of this ancient tapestry, exploring how a simple script became the backbone of a civilization that dared to write its own destiny. And so, as we sail into the sunset of our Phoenician adventure, let's take a moment to appreciate the ripples this alphabetic wave left in its wake. The Phoenician alphabet was like an ancient startup that went viral, influencing writing systems from the Aramaic to the Hebrew, and even the Arabic scripts. It's like the alphabetic version of a catchy pop tune that gets stuck in everyone's head, spreading quicker than a rumor at a high school reunion. The Greeks took it, added vowels, because let's be honest, reading without vowels is like eating soup with a fork, and passed it on to the Romans, who spread it across Europe like a linguistic wildfire. Now, let's not get carried away with the idea that the Phoenicians were these altruistic scribes just handing out free alphabets. No, they were more like ancient venture capitalists. Their alphabet was a tool for commerce, a way to keep those trade routes humming as efficiently as a well-oiled machine. The Romans, ever the pragmatists, saw the value in this nifty tool and used it to unify their sprawling empire. And here we are, centuries later, still tapping away at keyboards that owe a nod to those 22 letters carved into stone and papyrus. But before we pop the champagne and start a Phoenician fan club, let's sprinkle in a dash of reality. The romantic notion of the Phoenicians as the sole architects of modern literacy is a bit like crediting Shakespeare with inventing the English language. Sure, they laid the groundwork, but it was a collaborative effort across centuries and continents. The Greeks and Romans were the ones who took the Phoenician script and ran with it, crafting epic poems, philosophical treatises, and imperial edicts. The Phoenicians handed over the baton, and the Greeks and Romans sprinted to the finish line. It's also crucial to remember why the Phoenicians spread their alphabet in the first place. This wasn't some grand mission to enlighten the world. It was a matter of economic survival. The alphabet was a tool to ensure that contracts were clear, trade networks were maintained, and taxes were collected without a hitch. In short, it was a means to an end, not an end in itself. The spread of their script was less about cultural enlightenment and more about keeping their trade empire running like a finely tuned ship. Yet, in their quest for efficiency, the Phoenicians inadvertently sowed seeds that would bloom into the rich tapestry of literacy we know today. It's a testament to the unintended consequences of human ingenuity. Like the inventor of the internet, who never imagined the cat memes and viral dance videos it would spawn, the Phoenicians couldn't have foreseen the literary and cultural revolutions their simple alphabet would ignite. And let's not gloss over the darker shades of this tale. The Phoenician legacy, like any great historical narrative, is a blend of triumph and tragedy. While their alphabet became a bridge between cultures, it also existed in a world where trade often meant exploitation. The prosperity of the Phoenician city-states was built on a foundation that included slavery, a grim reminder that the wheels of commerce have always been greased by more than just coin. It's an uncomfortable truth, but one that adds depth to our understanding of their legacy. So, as we close the chapter on this ancient saga, let's raise a metaphorical glass to the Phoenicians. They were the original efficiency experts, the ancient world's answer to Silicon Valley, and their alphabet was their greatest legacy. It was a tool born of necessity, a catalyst for change, and a bridge between civilizations. In their quest for profit, they inadvertently shaped the course of history, leaving a legacy that continues to influence our world in ways they could never have imagined. In the end, the Phoenician alphabet is a testament to the power of simplicity and the enduring impact of a revolutionary idea. It's a reminder that even the smallest innovations can leave a mark on the tapestry of history. So next time you jot down a note, type out a message, or simply read a sign, spare a thought for those ancient traders who, in their quest for efficiency, left us a legacy that continues to shape our world.